Back, everyone. We are going to reconvene now our special council meeting to deal with the 2017 budget for the City of Vancouver. We've got a quorum of council back in the chamber, and so we're going to dive right back into our speakers list. Today is about hearing from our staff and speakers with feedback on the draft 2017 capital and operating budget. And we are on speaker number 5 in our public body and union representative list, and speaker number 5 is Rob Weeks, who's the president of Vancouver Firefighters Local 18. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today, Mayor and Council. I want to start my message just talking about our firefighters in our community. You should be exceptionally proud of the men and women that serve you as firefighters in this community. Not only do they give back through their profession, often with thank you very much, often with great personal sacrifice. I'm sure you're aware of this. They also contribute thousands of hours a year volunteering in the community they work in. You may not know this. We now contribute about $150,000 off our own paychecks per year from all our firefighters for charitable causes in the community, which include snacks for kids, over $100,000 feeding needy kids. On December 13th, we're going to donate $40,000 worth of toys, the Pan Pacific Toy Drive, for kids in need, and you're welcome to attend. But that said, they need your help. Mayor, I want to thank you for coming to the fire hall on November 23rd and taking that opportunity to ride along well past midnight at that fire hall and seeing firsthand what those firefighters and first responders are going through on the downtown east side. And I want to thank you for that. It meant a lot to those men and women, and it was for the first time in a long time they felt really encouraged and felt that the city was supportive and behind them. As you know, there's 1,255 runs in November. They're on pace for 1,600 this month. To give you some perspective, that puts us at the busiest fire hall in Canada by a significant amount, the busiest fire trucks in Canada by a significant amount, and we haven't assessed where we sit in North America, but I think it's fair to say that we'd be right up there with the busiest fire apparatus in all of North America. This is the new normal. We don't look at this as a spike anymore. This trend has grown from last year, and it looks to only get worse with the low cost availability of this drug. We expect these overdoses to continue. And this kind of call volume has a severe impact on the firefighters of the downtown east side. Without additional resources down there, their training's impacted significantly. Their ability to do community outreach is impacted significantly. And what we really need is a long-term solution. And part of that long-term solution for sure is what you're proposing, that 3-man medic unit down there in the downtown east side. So thank you for that. We're hopeful that you consider it strongly. I understand there's going to be a vote on it coming up soon, so please consider it. And I'll take any questions if you have any.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Weeks, and thanks again to you and members at Fire Hall 2 for hosting myself and Sarah from my team. It was an eye-opener, and I've been out on the streets a lot over the years, but stunning to see the impact right now and the incredible work done by firefighters on the front lines right now to save lives. So in addition to all the regular workload, it's extraordinary pressure right now. And I know on behalf of all council, we're very thankful for the good work being done, and we're hosting a forum tomorrow night, which will be here at City Hall on the fentanyl overdose crisis, and looking forward to being able to share some more information and next steps with people who come tomorrow evening to City Hall. So again, a big thanks to you and your members, and I'll go to questions. Councillor Carr is first.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much, Mr. Weeks, and for you to ask us to be proud of. We are proud of firefighters, and not only the work they do as first responders in this city, but the work they do in terms of contributing to civil society and to the betterment of all people within our city. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to them. My first question has to do with the situation, obviously, with the increased number of calls that you've just talked about, and on track to 1,600, which is quite phenomenal. In terms of those calls, can you just give me a ballpark or a sense of how many of those are life and death situations? In other words, you're responding to fentanyl and maybe the use of naloxone.
Well, last month it was over 700 overdoses, and every single one of those overdoses is life-threatening.
Wow.
So it's a
Okay.
significant amount of those calls are life and death situations.
And what does that, can you paint a picture for people who might not, who may benefit from hearing that picture? This is a publicly recorded council session. Um, Paint a picture of what it's like to respond hour after hour to call after call, many of which are life and death situations.
Well, you know, we all get into this profession to make a difference in our community, and in talking to the members in the downtown east side, you know, there's a feeling of a bit of hopelessness because seemingly all their efforts are going in vain. They'll often even respond to the same patient during the same shift with an overdose and then once again another overdose. So that's really difficult to handle mentally
Yeah.
on that whole first responder community, not just firefighters, paramedics, police, some of our other city workers that are there on the downtown east side. And it's not just a downtown east side problem. It's the epicenter, surely, but this problem is spread throughout the city. And with our firefighters tied up as much as they are on the downtown east side, that makes them less available for our other calls that we need to go to. For example, that downtown east side is a high-risk fire area. Those are some of our most vulnerable people in the city. Often those buildings are in a state of disrepair. They're often, there's hoarding issues, and all those lead to significant fire risk. And if we're tied up, which we are, a significant amount of time, that means a delayed in response for the other things we need to do.
Right. Thank you. You're right. The other needs for which we have had the staffing in place don't disappear.
Yes.
Which leads me to my next question, which is, in the last few months, as we've been dealing with this at council, we've heard that there is one sort of short-term solution has been the deployment of staff, of engines, of medics from other stations within the city to the downtown east side, number 2 hall. What's your response to that as a strategy? How does does it work, does it not work?
That's a great question. If you're just chasing call volume in a fire service, you're not doing a service to the community. Call volume is only a piece of the puzzle when it comes to fire response. The other piece of the puzzle is risk. So if you take an apparatus out of Grandview or out of Kitsilano or out of Kerrisdale, that's one less rig in those communities that's available for a response, which more often than not will mean a delayed response to an emergency in that community. And it may not sound like a lot, 30 seconds or a minute to have a fire truck respond from a neighboring district, but when you're talking about being in a room that's on fire or your loved one is not getting a blood flow due to a cardiac incident, 30 seconds, a minute, that's life and death. That matters significantly. So to take resources from other parts of the city where they're needed because the risk is there is not, in our view, a prudent long-term solution. It's a Band-Aid solution to a problem that in the downtown east side that looks to be the new normal.
Okay, thank you. And are you involved in the discussions? We've had a memo come to us with some options, as you've heard in the discussion today, with different options that does include a 3-person medic team additional in the downtown. But are you intimately involved with the discussions on these options?
No, we're not.
Okay. That's good information to know.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Meggs.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Weeks, for coming down. Can you just give me a reminder of what you reported yesterday, I think, through news release, about 1,255 calls in November, this just past November. A year ago in November, have you any idea what was the
Just
volume?
over 600, I believe.
So it's doubled. And what were you seeing October over November of this year?
The same stat. It was just
so-
it was around 1,100, I believe, in October. The chief is here; he would know for sure. But and comparable amount in the October before. So we've seen a more than doubling of our call volume, and like I said, we're on pace for 1,600 this month if the trend continues.
Right.
Which is,
So it's continuing to increase. It's
that's
not
right.
plateauing at all.
Yeah, it's not. We haven't seen a decrease. The month over month call volumes has been steadily increasing without a decrease at all.
So that's always a busy spot, unfortunately, but
Yes.
say 2 years ago, before fentanyl, what would be a normal volume there?
anywhere between 500 and 600, but
So 500 and 600.
just so you have some perspective, that is still an incredibly busy fire hall. At 500-600, we were already one of the busiest fire halls in Canada. So it's, you can imagine when you double that call volume or triple that, or looking at possibly quadrupling it over 10 years, it's a dramatic difference.
So the additional crew, and I mean, I guess as I expressed to some of your colleagues yesterday, I'm not a firefighter, which is a pretty obvious statement, but I wonder sometimes when we see the volumes go up, a straight volume response, while it's going to contribute to a solution, may not be the only part. Are there other elements of a response that you would see, or is it strictly the truck with those folks that I know that's your bottom line, that's the minimum. What else, what other measures do you think would be necessary from a first responder standpoint?
In the downtown east side?
Well, no, just for fentanyl. I don't think it's, as you mentioned, not just a downtown east side situation.
We are still a labor-intensive, resource-driven profession. So at the end of the day, more staffing, more resources really would make a big difference. I mean, that's not the only solution. There's other solutions out there, innovative scheduling solutions for firefighters that are trying to cope with repetitive, busy night shifts. Those are all options. But the most important piece for us, and truly it is the most important piece, is more resources as far as staffing goes. Because that's really what our profession still is.
Directly saving lives.
Absolutely.
So
and that's important to note. I think, Councillor Meggs, you're on, it's a good point that a third medic unit also, I think, we believe will have a direct impact on lives, because those lives matter, and we'll be able to respond quicker to an overdose because we'll have more versatility, more flexibility than that downtown east side fire hall. So it will directly impact in lives being saved.
Your members work side by side with ambulance paramedics, but
Yes.
You're the first there. That's the
Often.
reality. And in the last 12 months, the ambulance service, which I don't want to debate, but they changed their response times for many things, so that they were coming, maybe perhaps not as quickly as they would have under the previous regime where the protocols were different. Is it possible for the city to say, you know what, we just can't go any further on this? I mean, I don't mean a humanitarian, but from an operational standpoint, is there any way at all we could just say, you know what, this isn't our department, we should wait for the ambulances? What would be the consequences of those kinds of determinations?
Well, you'd be risking lives. I mean, we are first responders as well as firefighters. We're a rescue. We're beyond just fighting fires, and we've been that. That's been in our profession for decades now, and so. We certainly believe that there's more paramedics needed, and this is more than just a municipal issue. Obviously, it's a federal component, there's a provincial component. We're all Canadian citizens, so it's not just a municipal problem. Certainly, on the downtown east side and in Vancouver, the city of Vancouver is bearing the brunt of that. And we'd argue that there is more resources needed in the ambulance service, but that really doesn't have a lot of relevance for what it means for us as frontline firefighters, because even if you add more ambulances to the service, it doesn't affect our call volume, and it doesn't affect the increased risk to our public when our fire trucks are tied up at these incidents. So you could put 10 more ambulances in the downtown east side, and I probably would argue that's prudent, but that won't help the problem in the fire service.
I think
Short of not responding at all to these overdoses, which I don't think is the direction that we want to go.
It's everybody's problem. We can't just point to the province, although we may wish they did more. We've got to do our part as well.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Councillor DiGenova.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weeks. Sorry, got stuck there. My first question, first of all, I'd like to just echo other councillors in thanking you and your members who run towards danger when others run away from danger. And also, I understand from the picture that you painted, as Councillor Carr had asked, that it must be very difficult for your members. In trying to weigh this, and again, you don't have to answer any of my questions, but when did this came to us 2 days ago in a memo. So I've had my, budget book for quite some time, and we're being asked to make a decision quite quickly on the fly for this extra 0.5% that usually would be covered off by the provincial government. So I suppose I'm concerned that if we did make this decision and move forward with this amount, how would we know that we'd be able to sustain this next year? Or would the provincial government, in fact, expect us to pick up more of the tab if they see that we're going to do this. So I'm just wondering if you have had any conversations with the BC ambulance paramedics, and how does it work when you respond? When you respond to an issue with someone who is suffering from fentanyl overdose, do they need to go to the hospital, or can you administer the care there on site that they don't need an ambulance afterwards? I'm just trying to understand the process.
Sorry, there's a lot of questions in there.
First, the process.
So, what do you mean? Just so I understand, I think I heard you to say that it's a provincial responsibility, and if that's what you got from me, that's not what I mean. I just mean that it's a provincial responsibility as well. So if I wouldn't, this is a municipal service, so first and foremost, you're charged as councillors and mayor, and I know you know this, for the public safety of the citizens of Vancouver. So this is, we would strongly advocate that this is a bold move by this mayor and council to add these resources to the downtown east side, and it's needed. And it's needed on a municipal level. It's needed for your municipal first responders. Above and beyond that, absolutely, the provincial government, we believe, has a role to play in this and certainly needs to add resources. And like I said to Councillor Meggs, I believe that there's more ambulances needed on the street, but that won't necessarily, I won't actually make a perceivable difference on the impacts to the fire service. Although we're responding to the same call, we still go. We're not going to not go because there's more ambulances in the street. More ambulances in the street's needed because the call volume's there, and that'll make for an efficient handoff, and we won't be delayed as much in our waiting for ambulances to arrive. But so that's a positive, but it won't, the provincial government injecting cash into the ambulance service or money into the ambulance service with more ambulances won't decrease the risk to the depth of response we're seeing because our rigs are tied up, or it wouldn't make it any better if we take a rig out of Kitsilano or Kerrisdale, for example. Wouldn't change that outcome.
So a follow-up question to that would be, and I have a few, but I'll ask one at a time. I just need to get them all in the next couple of minutes, is regarding, you had mentioned that it wouldn't really make a difference if there were more ambulances and more paramedics. What I'm asking is when you treat someone, do they then have to be transported to the hospital by an ambulance paramedic usually? Or does fire deal with it on site and that's it? That's the end of it. I'm not an expert in that.
No, we transfer care to ambulance. They're the higher level of training. We transfer care to ambulance. So if someone needs to be transported, the hospital ambulance makes that decision. But to be clear, I'm not saying that an increase in resources to the ambulance service will make no difference. I think it'll make a big difference. It just will make very little difference for the impact in the fire service.
So 25 ambulances, as per the report, wouldn't make a difference and free you up to be able to
Like I said, it'll reduce our wait times at certain calls, but we're still going to go to those calls. We'll still go to those overdoses, barring a decision from council to tell the fire department to no longer respond to overdoses or cardiac arrests, which I don't think is the direction this council wants to go, and it's certainly not a direction any city in Canada has gone. More ambulances will not make a significant difference in what's happening in the fire service, other than...
Sorry, just one quick more question, and I have 15 seconds, and sorry to interrupt you. Could you also define for me what a fire medic does? I mean, other than Chicago Fire, I've never really heard the term fire medic, and I'm interested to learn what it is. I just didn't have further information in the memo I received. So do they have the same training as paramedic or
No, they're first responder trained, which is the level of all your staff in the city of Vancouver. But fire medic is a designation that our department uses to title an apparatus there's not common designations across North America, but what it really is a fully functioning fire crew that also responds to medical emergencies. So every firefighter on that medic unit will respond to a structure fire as well as a medical incident, the same as an engine, the same as a ladder, and that's the way the fire service is built.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Stevenson is next.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. To be sure that most councillors understand the firefighter's role as a municipal role, and that it's part of the municipal budget. And I think that if there are councillors who don't know the full role, at least I realize that many of us have had the opportunity to visit with you and go through it, that you're quite open to showing us about and giving us a pretty in-depth understanding of the role that you do play. Am I right?
Yes,
Yeah, I've done
absolutely.
that.
I don't want to speak for the chief, but I'm sure, Councillor, if you wanted to come and do a ride along in the fire hall, we'd certainly support it. I imagine the chief would support it as well.
I appreciate that. I heard you on the radio this morning, and I thought it was really an excellent interview.
Thank you.
One of the areas that a lot has been covered now, but one of the areas that I thought was particularly helpful was in discussion with the necessity to have staff to work with traumatized firefighters after obviously some very, very traumatic incidents that build up over time. It's analogous, I think, to the folks coming back from overseas in the Army and are in shock because of what they see. And most people don't go into your career thinking that you're going to have to see the kind of damage that there is in the streets and so on. So you talked a fair bit about the need for that. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more. I know that we're putting money aside and you were appreciative of that in the interview. If you could talk a bit about the necessity, given that the police already have someone in that kind of a role.
Yeah, we were exceptionally happy to see that that was something that the council was considering because it's really a needed position. We have a member right now of our association, an employee of yours that does probably 30 to 40 hours a week of his own time into assisting our members with mental health and including other employees of the city of Vancouver. He was first and foremost, his name's Steve Fraser, was involved in the park incident when unfortunately our fellow employee Jody passed away. He helped with the city employees there. So his work goes beyond just our fire service, but this is something the fire service has really been struggling with for a long time, the mental health aspect of our profession. And, you know, we were slow to react, and that's understandable. You know, there's a stigma to mental health, and we're also often not the first to put up our hand and say we need help. We're just not good at that. We're you know, you get into this profession believing you're there to help people, but it's really hard for any of us, me included, to say, hey, I need some help. So we're making positive steps. The department's making positive steps. As a union, we're making positive steps and recognizing that because at the end of the day, we're human beings. Whether we're firefighters, ambulance, or police officers, we're not robots. And to watch kids die in front of their parents or parents die in front of those kids, which we've all responded to, and just to give you a little taste of what we see is hard on any human being. And to try to struggle to deal with that on your own is a lonely place to be. And yeah, as you know, suicide rates are dramatically higher in first responders and firefighters than they are in the general community. So the move that you're making, hopefully, to add a position, I think that's what that funding would be for, to add a full-time position dedicated to mental health is a really progressive step and one that's greatly needed in our service.
And I think it's one that'll be supported by the public from my read. Certainly, listening to the interview this morning, the interviewer was, I think, more moved by that discussion than anything else, and kind of taken aback that that this hasn't been already done. Do you know, obviously you mentioned that the police already have a person in this kind of position. Do you have any idea of other fire departments across the country? Of course, many of them are not dealing with the same.
Yeah, there's other fire departments across the country that have full-time positions dedicated.
Have full-time positions?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, it's hard for us to imagine going to some of the things that you do, as well as the ambulance services, going to car crashes and finding people and so on. What that does to the psyche is obvious. So I'm really pleased that this came up and that you raised it in this interview today.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that matters to us. You know, our members will hear this and hear your comments, and that matters to them. And it certainly, when someone's struggling with a call like this, to know that there's leaders in an organization that are hearing it, you know, maybe not specifically to their individual needs, but just broadly is very meaningful to them. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks again, Mr. Weeks, for being here, and to all the members. And we appreciate all your input and all the great work you do. Thanks. And we're on to speaker number 6, Andrew Ledger, who is the president of QP 1004. our outside workers. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Um, Sorry, I'm too tall for your podium. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I just wanted to make some brief comments about this year's budget. In particular, the investment that the city is making in sewers infrastructure. It's important work. We're glad it's a priority for council, and our members are excited to perform the work and do it at a level that you've come to expect from our dedicated staff at our members at 1004. And also the expansion and sanitation branch and what you're moving forward with there as far as adding some more street cleaning service and litter pickup and abandoned garbage. I think it's a really positive direction for our members in sanitation. It's important for them to see that the city is invested in sanitation branch and that the city is committed to making it a clean and vibrant place for not only the citizens of Vancouver, but for all the people who are coming to this wonderful destination from around the world. So those two pieces are really, really exciting for us, and we look forward to doing that work. And on behalf of all of our members, all 3,500, but in particular the 500 who are working in the downtown east side of the PHS, I just wanted to say I'm very, very encouraged by how serious council is taking the fentanyl crisis and the public health emergency. It's important as a resident of the city and for all of our members to know the council is really committed to tackling this difficult crisis that we find ourselves in. Thank you. That's all. I'm happy to.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ledger. And just a big thanks to all your members as well. And we just been talking about first responders, but as has been pointed out in a lot of the stories around the fentanyl overdose crisis, the folks working in shelters, outreach workers, sanitation workers, it's impacting many people who work at the city who are out there trying to help our citizens and keep the city safe and healthy. And I know your members are bearing a huge load for this too. So I really appreciate all the efforts being made and all the good work being done across the board, really, to keep our city among the best in the world. So thanks on both those fronts. You got questions from Councillor Meigs?
Hi, Mr. Ledger. Thanks for coming. Just a couple, because we've got lots of people coming still, but to speak. But I guess this was in a year when we were really focusing in the past 12 months on trying to really improve the level of cleanliness in the city by adding staff and reorganizing some of our recycling work and so on. Is it your assessment that those efforts have paid off? Because there's additional resources here again this year. I just want to know if we're making headway. And then I want to ask you a bit more about the fentanyl situation.
Sure. It's early days. The implementation of the labor adjustment plan, which was the move away from recycling service and into the more of the street cleaning, it's only really been happening for the last 6-8 weeks or so. So it's I can't speak to how much of an impact it's having yet, but I'm very encouraged by the work. Our members are doing the work, and there's a system now where it seems very organized, where we know what the problems are, we know where our staff need to go to address specific issues. There's high priority items like abandoned garbage and abandoned mattresses that have dedicated resources now within our membership to go and deal with on a very quick, rapid response basis. So I think that the infrastructure and the planning that's gone into the sort of reshuffling of work and sanitation is positive, and I think it's responding to the needs of our community. And I'm excited to see sort of how it continues to unfold in the next year.
Thanks. On the issue that the mayor raised, which is one that we don't hear as much about, is that your members are really frontline in terms of trying to do some of the cleanup, because there are very large volumes of needles being distributed and so on to try to avert infection and disease and that kind of thing, as well as to try to minimize some of the risks to people out there. Is this producing new challenges for your members in terms of staying ahead of that and knowing how to manage those cleanup chores? Is there more work we need to do on that front?
I can say yes, it is having a considerable effect on our members. Not only in engineering, where we see a lot of it, just they're coming across syringes on a regular basis and having to sort of stop what you're doing and safely dispose of those, which is what we do, is a burden. But in our Parks Board especially, I know that we have our crews of gardeners who go out, who are there to beautify the city and make sure that our green spaces are gorgeous, and they are. But you know, I hear on a regular basis that our members will show up to a park and will spend maybe an hour, 2 hours, sometimes up to 3 hours picking up used syringes and harm reduction equipment to make sure that the parks are safe, which is the most important piece, but that definitely takes away from our ability to do the beautification work that really is the primary focus of gardeners, I would say. So it's a struggle, and it is
Yeah,
definitely.
it's not what they signed up for, although they wind up having to do it.
Exactly, and I think that's a challenge, and you know, that is their priority. They want to, you know, if they wanted to do frontline work, they would have got a job with me down the PHS, but they didn't. They want to do gardening, and so it's a difficult situation, you know. And then they're also, you know, oftentimes the first people to come across somebody in a park who might be, you know, sleeping or maybe suffering from some other sort of health crisis, and you know, they're not able necessarily to respond appropriately to those situations because that's not their mandate. They're there to clean the parks and maintain the spaces and make them beautiful. So I think there's some work that could be done there to maybe better address this health crisis, but
Yeah, I think that
it's a deep thing to get into.
one of the unknown or not so obvious impacts is that members of the public, you know, in Angie Livingston Park, we hear from taxpayers who are really not feeling comfortable using the park because of what of the issues there with syringes and so forth, and so there's a loss of public access to a loss of that investment, not to mention the diversion of time that your members are undertaking. So,
Absolutely.
okay, well, I hope that if council agrees to some of these additional resources, they can be allocated some of the ways you suggest. So thanks for your time, and thanks to your members for that.
Pleasure.
Councillor Carr, you have questions?
Yeah, just a couple of brief ones, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming to speak with us and to the work. If you can convey my thanks to the work that your members do for this city.
I will.
So my first question was actually very much related to what you just mentioned, which is the issue of cleaning, of dealing with spaces that are may have people living in them, camped there overnight, etc., because we have a homeless crisis in the city too. Do you have a good system for how you convey that information, training up at your staff level, and then a method where your staff can report in to other staff within the city if you come across situations which you feel might be either dangerous or somebody might be in difficulty, etc.?
So the work's compartmentalized between our local QP 1004 and also QP 15, who are the local represent the rangers. So I know when they come across encampments or people that are in parks, our members' mandate is to inform their management, who then get in touch with the rangers, and then Warren Williams would be the best person to ask about how that works. You know, the general policy in for our members in the parks is when they see people not to approach them and to relay that to their supervisors, who will then triage that work to someone else. That's the approach that the Parks Board has right now, and that's what our members are instructed to do, and that's what they do.
Okay. And in terms of support to your members in dealing with new things that just haven't been there before, like the amount of syringes, et cetera, that are in the parks, do you feel that that's being handled sufficiently so that your members and our employees are well versed in the protocols for safety?
I think that the safety protocols are clear, and they haven't really changed drastically in the last number of years. The issue is just volume, just the fact that you may have spent, you know, 5, 10, 15 minutes of a workday dealing with the collection of these abandoned syringes and other harm reduction equipment. Now it's becoming a cornerstone of your job, especially if you're dealing with parks such as Andy Livingston, where you know when you're going to that park, a good chunk of your day is going to be spent just making sure the space is safe, firstly, and then if there is some time, maybe you can do some of the beautification work that you actually came there with the intention of doing.
Right. Well, thank you for doing that work, because it's essential. And I just want to also end by thanking you for taking on the transition of some jobs into other kinds of jobs, and the increased emphasis we have on keeping our streets even cleaner. I get back reports from the public that this is very welcome. and people are really happy. The business improvement associations are really happy with that work that's going on. So thank you.
That's great. I appreciate that.
Councillor DiGenova.
Thank you very much. I had some questions actually stemming from Councillor Meggs's questions before, and regarding sort of the issues surrounding needles and I suppose risky conditions. Is it fair to say for your workers?
Sure.
And I'd also like to echo the thanks. I'll try not to take too long doing so. I know there are a lot of speakers today. I have a question regarding why now? I mean, I understand that we've had issues in our public spaces for quite some time before even the fentanyl crisis that we're experiencing now or that came to light within the past 8 months. Has this been an ongoing issue for several years in certain areas for your members, this situation?
I would say yes. In the downtown east side and Chinatown area, there's always been higher density of syringes and whatnot that are in those spaces. That hasn't drastically changed, but I mean, what my members are telling me that over the last number of years, they have seen an increase. What exactly that can be attributed to, I wouldn't want to speak to, but there does seem to be a lot of them. And I mean, Andy Livingston's a relatively new park, and that might have something to do with why that particular area, that particular park is seeing such a high influx of harm reduction equipment being discarded there. But
thank you. As a park board commissioner before, my mic's a little bit sensitive today. I thanked your members then, and I know that they do an excellent job of keeping our parks and public spaces areas clean. And again, you don't have to answer this. I'm just wondering if you've heard anything from your members regarding sort of issues surrounding mental health as well. I mean, is there a bigger umbrella here that contributes to the use of drugs, which obviously would contribute to the amount of needles that are left in these areas for your members to collect?
I can't say that I've had any direct conversations with our members around the mental health issues and how that relates directly to the needle collections that they're doing. I could tell you my own opinion at length, but I'm not going to here and now, but I'm happy to talk to you about that at some other time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's all your questions. Thanks again very much, Mr. Ledger, and big thanks again to all the members of QP 1004. We are on to, we have Warren Williams is next, but he had to step out for a brief chunk of time, and he will be back a little bit later this afternoon. So we will slot the president of QP 15 in when he gets back here in the council chambers. And we're on to speaker number 8, the chair of Vancouver Park Board, Sarah Kirby-Young. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, councillors, especially for the opportunity to be on the agenda at short notice after the Park Board unanimously passed the recommended 2017 operating and capital budgets, as well as 2017 fee structure at our special meeting last night. A couple of comments. I'll just make a couple of global comments, and I'll be brief in the interest of everybody's time today, because I know it's a busy agenda. Regarding the Park Board budget, and particularly relating to some of the pressures that earlier speakers have identified, of the $118 million in operating funds that the Park Board has put forth for Council's consideration, I do want to note that 48.14% of the total ops budget is coming from Park Board generated revenue, and the remaining 51.86% from tax support. I want to commend the Park Board staff for doing a great job in working to maximize revenues at the Park Board. In order to stretch our budget and ensure we can deliver quality services. But I also want to note that we're at capacity, I think, in terms of revenue generation, and coupling with the fact that we're seeing increasing pressures on our parks, ones that are beyond the typical scope of what you would expect park delivery to be, getting into homelessness, safety issues, and other concerns. We're going to experience increasing pressures in the coming period, and I'm sure we're going to have more conversations about that. I do also want to note that and thank council and city staff for their support in including an additional 5 new park rangers as a starting measure to help address public safety in parks. This is an area we've been woefully under-resourced, and as you heard from other speakers, we have a number of issues every morning where we're not just going in to keep our parks beautiful, we're going in to try to keep them safe. And I personally receive, as do other commissioners, a lot of emails from parents who have young children who are uncomfortable with taking their kids down to their parks. We're densifying in the city. The parks are becoming people's backyards. They're more heavily used. And they're less and less comfortable in being there. So we've got some serious social challenges, which is, obviously I know Council's been grappling with for some time and is not news as it relates to homelessness, but we're really seeing the impact in our parks, both the experience for residents and trying to find ways to address those so that people feel comfortable while recognizing those less fortunate and how they can coexist in those public spaces. So I did want to take the opportunity to bring that to Council's attention today. In terms of why I'm here specifically today, a little bit of context. We did approve a 2% fee increase at the Park Board last night on core recreation services. We wanted to hold to the level of inflation so that we can ensure we continue to keep our core recreational services as accessible to as many residents as possible, because we do recognize that Vancouverites are having a tough time with high cost of living. Having said that, we have some gaps, and we've identified one of those that we'd like to ask respectfully for some additional funding support from Council, and that relates to a capital ask for washroom renewals. I think it was approximately a month ago, Council considered a motion, I believe from Councillor Elizabeth Ball, regarding increased access to accessible washrooms, which you supported strongly and unanimously. The Park Board also considered a similar motion, and I would recognize that I think a lot of the public washrooms actually are in our public facilities, community centers, parks, and outdoor spaces, and also unanimously supported that we should strive to increase access to those washrooms. Currently, our existing inventory, we have some real gaps. We have a number of them that are just decrepit and in horrible state. I receive emails constantly, as do staff and as do my fellow commissioners, about these washrooms. Our remaining capital budget will fund needed upgrades to only 1 to 2 of the identified 5 critical washrooms that are in really dire straits. And we don't have the funds to complete those washroom renewal projects since 2017. So the motion that has been submitted for consideration from Council is an additional funding ask for $1.2 million from the 2017 capital budget to enable completion of all 5 washroom renewal projects currently in progress. And I hope that you're able to support that as a very core need in the city. Those 5 projects would be at Lumberman's Arch, Third Beach, Clinton Park, Jonathan Rogers, and Fillets Park. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for being here to speak, and thanks for the good to see the unanimous support of the proposed budget. I've got Councillor DiGenova on first for questions.
Thank you very much for coming to speak to us today. And I know that Councillor Deal and myself, both being former Park Board commissioners, I certainly got some questions about accessible washrooms and was more than happy to support Councillor Ball's motion last month. In moving forward and working together with the Park Board, and we look at sort of the services that we share and now work together on and that have been streamlined through the Vancouver Service Review of a few years ago. Do you find that it's in any way harder to do more with less, in a sense? If we're looking at accessible washrooms, these are 3 that you're asking for right now. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're asking for the ability to complete all 5. Currently, we have enough in the budget to complete probably 1.5, approximately.
Okay, so if it's a city mandated goal, and although it's Park Board land, but it's still within the city, that's something that I certainly would be looking at to work with the Park Board on together. In moving forward, are there any plans for any other accessible washrooms?
Yeah, we have some temporary facilities, porta potties, so the staff are looking at changing out some of those lease agreements to accessible facilities. And for any new developments or renovations to facilities, we want to ensure that everything moving forward is accessible. So that's the goal.
Okay, and as one of the liaisons, the Persons with Disabilities Advisory Committee that works closely with the seniors who have mobility issues, I understand that this is something that they've been pushing for. And the type of accessible washroom, would it be similar to what you would see in Jim Diba Plaza, which is one of the newest, I suppose, accessible washrooms in the city?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very good example. I think that, sometimes the technology that changes over time, so we want to be continually, as depending upon the timing of installation of the projects, but I'd say that's a good example. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Sounds like a very reasonable request.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Carr's next.
Yes. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for coming. I'm glad that you're able to speak to. I just really wanted to relate to you because you did raise the question. I don't think you were here earlier when I asked Ms. Impey the question about how we should handle, or how she suggested us handling a budget increase. And what she suggested is that at the first quarterly update of our capital plan in the upcoming year, that we could make a revision to that capital plan and look at drawing resources from, well, often resources are moved around. That's what our updates are all about. So would that be a satisfactory answer to your need?
We would be very grateful for council support, and if that comes in sort of quarterly updates, I think, would let the staff work to that. I think there may be some efficiencies in tendering the work as a group, but I'm confident that our staff could work out payment structures and the project timelines to accommodate that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Affleck, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, welcome to City Hall. Just a quick question regarding, congratulations on doing a 2% revenue and capping it at the rate of inflation. That's really good to see. But you guys have implemented a lot of new events. You have the new one up on at Bloedel Conservatory. Obviously, the success of the Bloedel Conservatory in general has been quite good. Can you tell us a bit how that's helped your revenue, and how much money are we talking about when you look at these events that you're adding, and as well as the advertising that you have, and what, if that is a revenue source or if it's just internal on your vehicles?
I can, and the answer is our holiday events are extremely popular. The most popular one in terms of volume and revenue generation is the Van Dusen Festival of Lights. We're piloting the concept called Holiday Heights because Queen Elizabeth Park is the highest point of Vancouver, and we'll include a Ferris wheel for those that are interested this year. But the way that that particular project is being supported as a new project is that there's $1 on the admission at Van Dusen that will help offset the costs of starting up a new event. But yes, those special events are typically revenue generators for the park board. The 2%, when I spoke earlier, is related to core recreational services, the ability for people and families to go to their community center, to take their kids swimming, to go to ice rinks, things of that nature. But we also look for opportunities for savings. So we try to provide access through online ticketing being cheaper to Van Dusen and so on. But the revenues are significant, and I did mention earlier I'm personally worried about the park board's ability to continue to generate that in terms of volume. I think in some cases we're maxing out. We're getting to capacity on some of those events. And I think the demands of the park board budget are growing, and the percent that the park board receives hasn't been, but it's very encouraging to see that residents really do want to see continued and growing investment in their parks and civic centers.
So those kinds of events, while fun, don't generate a ton of revenue for you, I assume.
Well, they certainly help. I mean, together they add up between fees for programs, pitch and putt, marinas, special events like Festival of Lights and others. That altogether is our revenue generation, which allows us to generate nearly 50% of our budget.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And Councillor Meggs.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and welcome, Ms. Kurbia. Councillor Affleck was congratulating you on keeping revenue to 2%, but I personally would be okay if it was a bit higher. But that's just a one of those things. If you get over 2%, then that's all for programs, right? Anyway, congratulations on a couple of fronts. I think it's great news that you have a tentative joint operating agreement with the community centers, and I hope that they embrace it. And also that the board has now adopted the access without fear policy. I know that really was something that was not that difficult for you as it turned out when you went back to take a look at it, but still means a great deal to a lot of people in the community to hear that that commitment. So I always wanted to appreciate those things. On the washroom front, looking at the capital spending for the coming year, you had $300,000 allocated already is it for these projects or for maintenance across the board?
It was, I have the general manager so he can keep me honest on the specifics, but my understanding is that 300 was towards design and a partial completion of the project, but isn't sufficient to complete the full 5.
So this would get you 2, but the 1.2 million is required to get to 5 in 1 year.
Correct.
And in the absence of that, how long would it take?
Well, it's 300,000 a year, and it's, we divide 1.5 million times 5 washrooms. It would take you 3 or 4 years to get there, unless we are foregoing another priority. But as I said, I think staff's done a pretty good job of trying to make the dollar stretch. So
you don't see any room in the 21 million to do any reallocation?
I do not.
Year. Okay, thanks.
And thank you for your comments, Councillor Meggs, much appreciated.
Okay, that is all your questions. Again, big thanks for being here on behalf of the Park Board.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Cheers. And we are on to the rest of our speakers now. We'll come back to Warren Williams when he's back in the chamber. We have our first speaker from the balance of the list, and that's Wilson Munoz, followed by formerly homeless Dave and Mina Wong. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and councilors. Vancouver is still without a basic human right to housing. The 2017 budget summary states, Vancouver is an amazing city where we are constantly developing policies that address affordability, including affordable housing options and investing in affordable housing in the downtown east side. The world recognizes Vancouver as a global leader that is investing to ensure remains livable, sustainable, and equitable. Nothing further from the truth. Unfortunately, the examples that we see on the street are totally different. People are living on the street, density campers, indigenous people, retired people, seniors. We just heard from the Vancouver Public Library that place was being used as a shelter for the homeless. So it's really a shame that a city that hosted the 2010 Olympics, Winter Olympics, a city that hosted the 1986 Expo, hasn't been able to develop any social policies for housing, for affordable housing, and to deal with the homeless in the city. Let's take one example. A month ago, almost a month ago, the city hosted a housing affordability summit. Unfortunately, where experts from all over the world came to Vancouver. Unfortunately, people, the most vulnerable people of the city, couldn't attend this conference because the entrance fee was $374, which is the portion of the welfare allowance for shelter. So if they paid the $370, they wouldn't be able to pay for rent. So that was totally unthinkable, totally a shame that the most vulnerable people couldn't be there. Why? Was the city ashamed? Was the organizer ashamed? Were they ashamed in 2010? Were they ashamed in 1986 where the homeless were on the street? It's something where we need to show leadership, where we need to come together on a non-partisan and tell people, yes, we want you, we want to work with you, but we don't see that leadership, Mr. Mayor. Another example, you promised in 2008 that by 2015, homelessness will be eradicated. Unfortunately, we're in 2016, 8 years later, and homelessness has increased. It's exacerbated. Also, another example, 58 West Hastings, 10 city campers. You got an injunction to evict them, and then they moved to Thornton Park. The next day, they were arrested, their belongings destroyed, and they were in prison, some of them. The majority of them were indigenous people. The majority of them were vulnerable people. That's really a shame on the city. We have a counterexample by the mayor of Victoria. She got an eviction order. She decided not to exercise it. And what did she do? She went and spoke with the province, and they found safe shelter. That's showing leadership. That's showing a commitment to trying to solve the crisis. We can bring other examples, and one of them is the slumlords in the downtown east side. SRO people, the Sahara people, are being taken to court together with the city because the city is failing to enforce maintenance by law. We have vulnerable people living in places like people here cannot even think of, with rat, with mice, no elevator, no window, no heat for the winter, no fire escape. The city is responsible for that, Mr. Mayor. Can you bring your counselor, your people, and speak with them? They are not disposable people. They are human beings. They are like you and I. They feel, they have feelings. But we cannot address, so again, the city has to reconsider that. And this will take us to the root causes of the housing crisis, which is poverty and which is gentrification, displacement. Let's go back to the...
So you just have 15 seconds left. If you could wrap up in a
I just
sentence.
want to go quickly to the budget, and that is when we allocate 19 millions for operating and 485 million for the capital budget, and we only allocate 80 million for housing. That's totally wrong. On the other hand, we are allocating $290 million to increase the police budget. How are we going to address the crisis? Canada is the only member of the GH that doesn't have a plan to address the housing crisis. Remember, we are in unceded Coast Salish territory, mistreating people. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for being here and your input, Mr. Munoz. And no questions for you. We're on to formerly homeless Dave, our next speaker.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, councilors. This is unceded Coast Salish territory, Squamish, Musqueam, Tsubatuth. Mr. Chair, this budget is a disaster. Why is it a disaster? Well, let me say first of all that all these issues are interrelated. First, there's a pattern and cycle with the chair and with Vision Vancouver over the last, since they've been elected since 2008. First, you said you didn't see the spike in homelessness coming. My community in downtown Eastside saw it coming many years because of your weak, pathetic responses to homelessness. We know it was ineffective. We saw it coming. You made it epic failure. Affordability, epic failure. You didn't see it coming. You didn't see it coming. Transit, you didn't see that coming. Epic failure. Now Kinder Morgan, you didn't see that coming. Your friend in Ottawa. Epic failure. Now this budget, the Vancouver Police Department budget, is coming up, is inching up towards 25% of the operating budget. And who's the chair of the Vancouver Police Department? The same one who's epically failing. The city last year asked the Vancouver Police Department to cut 1.4, something minuscule, right? Very minuscule. They're kind of poking that tiger. And what did they come back and say? No, buddy, it's not going to happen. To the chair of the Vancouver Police Department. We can't do it. No, their budget went up. And what are they saying? Their excuses. Their excuses. I think they need to say they need more money to deal with street disorder. My community right now is basically an open air MASH hospital. People didn't see that coming. Record homelessness, hundreds of rooms lost in SROs. People are very vulnerable. There's always a new drug. Start saying Carfenol. The VPD budget is like a fattened pig. You really had an opportunity to use a surgical scalpel on that budget. You didn't do it. Eventually, you're going to have to use a butcher's knife on that budget. And I disagree with my friend Tim Lewis, who said, you know, a couple of years ago that we really need to freeze the budget. It's worse than that. It's out of control. You're going to have to chop away on that budget. And I'll tell you something. There is a mental health crisis in the Vancouver Police Department. You think I'm kidding? That's not a joke. Probably 20% of those officers are suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome. They should be off of my streets. They need help. You can buy them out. Get some job retraining opportunities. And the Vancouver Police Department is one place actually where tech would really help. There was a high-ranking officer in Toronto who was pushing these ideas of how to trim their budget a lot. They could do that through tech. They dismissed him, actually. But that's one area where you can actually use in the Vancouver Police Department. One last thing, Mr. Chair. I just want to tie this together. You're talking about fentanyl crisis, housing crisis, affordability crisis, homelessness crisis. And here's something you could have done and you never did. A few months ago, a professor at UBC came and he said to this council, and this is very important, there's a problem with recovery houses in this city where the vast majority of people that are entering it, just let me finish this thought, Mr. Mayor, it's very important.
You're over your time, so just wrap up in a sentence.
Because it's very important, because I came here a few months ago bringing up this issue. And he said the majority of the people that went into these recovery houses were not homeless. They were basically in SRO rooms. But when they came out of these recovery houses, they became homeless. So what happens to these people? Well, the likelihood is they're going to relapse, continuing this crisis. And nothing was done, Mr. Mayor. I brought this up with you. It is something that can be done by this city to plug that leak. You haven't done nothing.
We're going to go to Councillor DiGenova. Questions?
Thank you very much, Mr. Dave.
Yeah,
I just had a question regarding, you had talked about tax increases, and specifically, I mean, we received this memo 2 days ago. I don't see any line items yet. I'm going to be asking for some of that information. I couldn't fit it into my 5 minutes today. I know that you've probably come to council longer than I've been here, but I'm just wondering, have you ever seen council consider a 0.5% tax increase specifically to deal with homelessness or mental health issues, very specifically in the same time frame that this has come forward? And do you feel that this is maybe plugging the hole instead of dealing with the problem, band-aiding it? Do you have any thoughts on that? And again, you don't have to answer my question.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you have to ask yourself, why would you get a memo 48 hours before? You know, I mean, these are professional people. So obviously they're putting a lot of pressure on people to pass this. You know, in my community, I see...
I just have to say, first of all, I have the utmost faith in our staff. I'm asking you about the decision we're being asked to consider. So I always caution people on speaking negatively of our staff. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's 48 hours before they're asking. So you have to ask yourself. I mean, to me, that's pretty unprofessional, you know? So there's a reason behind that. And I want to say something about first responders. You know, in my community, I hear people talk about fire and others, and these are fine. But in my community, we have people who are volunteers, people who are not paid anything, people who are saving lives like all the time, constantly, no money. And they get static, actually, from the Vancouver Police Department and others. And that should be removed. You know, you're talking about you want to put some money, you should put some money in community on the ground in my community that doesn't cost, I think. The Vancouver Police Department shouldn't be in that business, first of all, the budget. All right, that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mina Wong.
It's a long day. Thank you for being here. I would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded land of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Today I'm going to talk about two things. First, define social and affordable housing honestly. Second, propose improvement of the current vacant property tax and also put forward two new taxes ideas, a luxury property tax and a property flipping tax. We have a housing crisis for over a decade with homeless population on the rise. Yet, this budget shows that over the past 3 years, not a single unit of supportive housing has been approved, not a single one. The city's 2004 Homeless Action Plan called for 800 units of social housing per year over 10 years. If it has been followed, we should have had 8,000 units by now. Let us see what has since this council has been doing. This budget shows you have approved 1,626 units of what you call social housing. But are this really social housing? This vision-led council redefined social housing in the most bizarre way. Allow me to show you an example. They asked a developer to build 1,000 apartments, and 30% of the units are slightly below market rents. The city actually accounts those units, 30 units, as social housing, when they're really not affordable to most people. Then it gets really illogical here. They also counted the rest of the 70 units as a social housing, even if they are charged market rent. Imagine I'm selling you a bag of rice, but only 30% of the content is rice, and the rest is sand. You would call CBC go public right away, won't you? Is this the redefinition of social housing fraudulent? I think it's very misleading. It also has very real implications for people in our city. A study by researchers Gabe Boothroyd and Jean Swanson showed that only 92 units of this 1,626 so-called affordable units are guaranteed to be real affordable housing. Affordable to people on welfare. This is the real reason why Vision failed to keep its promise of housing for all homeless people by 2015, and why people are moving away from Vancouver due to the lack of affordable housing. So I call on you to use a logical and honest definition of social housing. If you're going to build 92 units of social housing when Vancouver really needs 800 units per year, just say that. This vision-led council also misled us on affordable housing. Let me remind you again, according to Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, affordable housing is defined as costing less than 30% of a before-tax household income. This definition is widely recognized standard. But you changed that too. Councillor Jane was famously quoted for saying affordable housing is simply something that somebody can afford. Yeah, they just have to go to food bank to get groceries. Now let's turn to my second point, new taxes. By the way, Oscar Wilde once said that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. In the last election campaign, I proposed a plan for vacant property tax. Some of you said that is not possible. I was surprised to learn that the council has taken strides towards implementing a portion of my proposed tax, the part that I call the stick. So I thank you. However, the first part of my plan, the carrot, is missing. It is to incentivize owners to rent out vacant properties to increase rental supply.
Wong, you're over time, but you have some questions. First, we have Councillor DiGenova.
Microphone's not. There we go. Thank you very much. And thank you for bringing up the issue of affordable housing, if we can even call it affordable anymore. Some have come here to council and talked about 30% of your income. I understand that the province provides a shelter allowance of $375 to ceiling of $425 to some who are on disability. I suppose I have a question first about the taxes that you are proposing. I mean, we have so many taxes now, and you may have heard earlier our staff say that we're not going to be increasing immediately our enforcement officers on that. And we can't deal right now with the issues that we have, it seems, as we have a number of unpaid tickets, and we can't even get out to visit some of those businesses in violation, or soon it will be homes or short-term rentals. Do you have any concerns regarding that? I mean, if you impose a tax, should you be enforcing that tax?
Well, I believe, like the engineering department is doing a great job in giving out the tickets and then collecting the fines. I think for a while they're one of the most profitable departments, and so if the finance department, if they collect the property tax, it should be enough to fund enough inspectors out there to enforce the bylaws and then collecting the tax and make sure that the program runs for itself and also generating enough revenues for the city. I mean, for myself, for the luxury property tax, charging just 0.1% of properties over $2 million. There's about 10,000 properties in 2013, the estimate. So I think there's a lot more now. That would generate 13 million or 15 million tax for the city. So 0.2% will be double that.
Now, what you're proposing, would you grandfather that in for people like, I know that there are seniors that sit on our advisory committee or that email us, and they say, I may be house rich, but I can't even barely afford my property taxes now.
I mean, I believe in 55 and above age for seniors that they should get the tax, the grant, the homeowner's grant.
So if what you're asking is for if you're talking about $2 million, and I'll tell you, $2 million doesn't buy you much in the city anymore. $1 million, I mean, everyone who kind of owns a house, a single family home, is a millionaire here in the city of Vancouver. That being said, with what you're proposing, I suppose, would you be asking for any consideration for those people?
Definitely, there will be reasonable exemptions for people, like as you said, seniors, owners have been owning the property for decades. So definitely, this will be exempt from that. The other thing is the flipping, property flipping tax, which is quite common in Europe. Some of the European countries or cities. So, for people that flip it, to say that they bought it and sold it within a year, the flipping tax will be 25%, for example, of the property value. But if they keep it, to up to 25 years, they may pay 0% of the flipping tax. So the city has had extra revenues and also reduce using property, homes as profit generating means.
Well, I also have some issue with that as the only millennial who has friends that don't flip but have to leave the city, so they have no choice because it's not affordable. Another question is, and again, you don't have to answer this, but regarding, and it's come up a number of times, I've asked a number of speakers, the memo that we received 48 hours ago regarding the 0.5% increase request for property tax to deal with the fentanyl crisis. Have you seen something like this before? I mean, like, for instance, our mayor and current government promised to solve homelessness. Do you remember a tax ask for 0.5% to end homelessness? Or do you feel that that in a sense, and I'll ask you the same question as the last speaker, that this is a Band-Aid approach, that we should be looking at mental health and housing and true affordability?
I mean, the fentanyl crisis, it's sad. It breaks my heart, and I'm sure everybody here feels, for over 600 people died of something that can be prevented if they had housing, supportive housing, and that they can be properly looked after. Many of these people, homeless people, are addicted with the drugs because they have mental illnesses. They're not being looked after properly. They don't have a supportive housing, proper housing. Shelters are not housing. And so I really plead to this council to provide and consider supportive housing, provide adequate supportive housing and at affordable rate to these people.
Okay. Ms. Wong, you have some further questions? Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you. Now, I'm just curious as to why you chose the age of, or you or COPE chose the age of 55 for exemptions and above for the tax.
It's just because many people are retired at age 55 this time of the, this in our.
But if you're 55 and able to retire, you're fairly well off, I would. I mean.
Well, when you're sitting on like a $2 million homes, you can borrow against that property quite well.
Well, then, what's the problem with the tax if you've got $2 million and you can borrow? I don't.
Councillor Stevenson.
65 is the normal age of retirement, isn't it?
Councillor Stevenson, just to remind you, we're in council. I've got to.
Oh, thank you very much.
You stand.
Sorry. You didn't insist.
Yes, you are correct.
I just don't understand your unfair,
I'm trying to pick on you this council meeting, Councillor Stevenson.
Oh, yeah. Well,
just to balance things out, right?
Yeah. My turn, is it?
Chair.
So,
please continue.
So is this a plan that you talk about? You said it's your plan. Is that yours or was it a COPE policy?
It's just my recommendation.
Was it a COPE policy or your personal?
No, it's mine.
Oh, it's not a policy at all.
Now, if you look at the guest speaker list, it's Mina Wong. There's no.
No, but wherever you got that from, you said in the last election.
No, that's what we proposed, the vacant property tax during the last election.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Great, those are your questions. Thank you, Ms. Wong. Our next speaker is Brenda Ledley.
Hi there. It wasn't for some reason included on the sheet, but I actually am from the BC Alliance for Arts and Culture. I'm the new executive director, and I'm very glad to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. We know that you know that we're very grateful for all the art support you've given this art sector in the past, because we know that you actually get the value of arts and culture. Over the years, certainly over the 30 years I've been working in arts and culture, I've seen a huge improvement in the valuing of arts. And I'm glad to see that this council recognizes that. However, as my colleague Donna Spencer said, we're asking for an increase in the funding for core operating clients at the City of Vancouver, approximately, I think, $2.2 million on an $11 million budget, I think, Councillor Meigs. And this would align your proposed budget to the strategy in your current cultural plan to invest in the creative economy. We're asking for this increase for the core operating clients because the City of Vancouver's cultural funding has not kept pace with the growth of the sector. In fact, there are more artists and there is more creative activity happening in this province than ever before. Perhaps that's what accounts for the 25% increase in requests. There's a disparity in your funding. The number of organizations supported has increased 16% since 2012, and yet your funding has only increased by 10%. It's also curious that the number of organizations supported by the City of Vancouver decreased from 264 in 2015 to 261 in 2016. So you're supporting fewer people, fewer organizations. So that makes me wonder, what about funding growth in the arts? And what about the sustainability? How can there be sustainability and growth and a creative economy if we don't have the money to do that? We're asking for a 20% increase in funding for the core operating clients, which I believe is actually less than what we really should be asking for. Core operating funding is essential for organizations to become sustainable and contribute to the creative economy. With more operating support, core-funded organizations can create more jobs and bring more economic activity to the local community. It would bring artists' wages more in line with the national average. Comparative to other provinces, particularly those involved in the 5-municipality study of 2012, BC has the lowest wages in the cultural sector in Canada. I know this well, having just moved back here from Ontario. An increase in funding would enable more collaborations and support for independent and emerging artists in the city. It would also create more community engagement. All of these things are included in your strategic plan for your cultural plan. It would allow for professional development to enhance arts leadership, which is aging and is going to need to be replaced. More core funding would result in social innovation in the arts and more cross-sector collaboration between the arts and healthcare, between the arts and homelessness, youth at risk, addiction, and the list goes on. Recent studies in the UK and Australia have shown in particular that participation in arts and culture improves mental health. With increased investment, the City of Vancouver can also reach out to the underserved First Nations community and equity-seeking communities, of which there are many. There needs to be more recognition of arts and culture by government. Why don't you create a campaign, a public-facing campaign that says, we invest in arts and culture and you should too. Perhaps in that way we could drive more private support for the arts. But governments need to champion the arts. With increased investment at the City of Vancouver, core-funded organizations can do more research that will provide new data about the impact of arts and culture in communities. We really need to be conducting this research to measure outcomes. And I'm glad to see that their work will begin on a new cultural plan, because the cultural plan that was in existence from 2011, was it, to 2016, was based on cultural statistics between 2006 and 2009, a time when there was more investment in culture because of the Olympics. Those stats from that study is what you use to call yourself the #1 in grants in the country of those 5 cities. It's not true now. An increased investment in arts and culture would contribute to the creative economy via national and international touring for Vancouver-based artists, and therefore raise the profile of Vancouver. Some of the best artists in this country live here in Vancouver.
Ms. Ledley, you're over time. You have a concluding sentence. But you do have questions.
Make arts and culture the 4th pillar of sustainability in the City of Vancouver, because they're as important as healthcare and education.
Very good. You have some questions. Councillor Meggs.
All right, well, thanks for coming. And I don't disagree with any of your statements about the importance of investment in the arts. But I guess my feeling is we make considerable investments. Are you going to be going to Burnaby and Surrey and talking to them about their contributions?
Well, I certainly was at the Creative Cities Summit, and I had a few private conversations with those individuals and was shocked at their lack of investment. And the plan for the my plan for the Alliance is, in fact, to do a grassroots advocacy campaign to do just that.
Yeah. What do you think would be raised if Burnaby and Surrey contributed at the same rate that Vancouver does? Any idea?
Wow. How much of each one of them contributed? Well, it depends. It's confusing, when you look at what the cultural budget is, because there's the grant program, then there's the public art program, then there's the civic theater facility program, so it's very confusing. Yes, I mean, if they even match the grants program, it would mean a huge increase to, 22 million just in those 2 cities for the grants budget.
Yeah. I don't believe that Burnaby, or they have some cultural facilities, but the bulk of the ones are located here, right? I think that would be my guess.
The bulk of them, they have them, but yeah, there's usually one, lead cultural facility in each of those.
Right. What would you say to people who say, given that the arts are so successful here, we could reduce our contributions because it appears that the public is supporting them on their own? I do hear that argument, by the way. I mean, okay. I have to defend the spending we're now making. So what would you say to critics who would say it's already too much? We should be more close to the provincial level, which is the lowest in Canada for a provincial contribution.
Well, what I would say to that is that I really believe, after working for 30 years in this business, that the arts should be accessible to every single person, not just the people who can afford the tickets, and that's why it needs to be funded by government.
But we're not subsidizing the tickets. I mean, we're not,
Pardon me?
I guess your proposition is that we contribute across the board, not just provide a pool of cheap tickets. I mean, this is a very different kind of approach that.
I think the arts should be accessible to every single person. So that means that those who can pay do pay, and those that can't don't have to.
Right.
We've done this in my previous position at Magnetic North, which is a national theater festival. We implemented this idea, and it increased the capacity of attendance in just 1 year by about 25%.
Okay, well, look forward to seeing all the proposals on that front. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You have questions from Councillor Deal now.
Yes, welcome. Thanks for being here. Thanks for I think your first presentation here at City Hall.
Very first.
Excellent. Certainly agree that that with our new managing director who comes in, we'll be looking very closely at a new strategy which will have those kind of metrics, targets, and then a budget that needs to be developed that will match what we all agree needs to be done. I think that's a huge piece of what's going to come up next. But I was a little bit confused about one of your statements around increasing the number of people we give grants to. There's been some concern that we're giving grants to a lot more people, but then you said you thought we were giving them to fewer people or organizations.
Well, according just to the stats on your own budget.
Right. So we are giving them to more organizations. Some have dropped off. We're trying to manage the life cycle of arts organizations, and we've all seen some public examples of ones that have stopped receiving grants because they stopped existing. And I wasn't sure if you were aware that we're actually, a lot of what we've been doing in recent years is in response to the arts community saying we need more opportunities for emerging and individual artists. We as a body cannot give money to individuals, so we've created a program called the Creative Spark through Art Stars, right? So that's new money. It's a small amount given out in very small amounts to individuals and small emerging organizations so they can say they have a record of receiving city grants and become eligible for other grants. Is that the kind of approach you think might be useful?
Well, I think if core-funded companies, when they get more money, they can actually do a lot to help those emerging artists and those young artists by bringing them and supporting them in their work. And so then they wouldn't need to become operating clients.
So you'd prefer that money go to the existed well-established is the word I want, existing as opposed to new and emerging?
I just don't think there's enough money, Heather. I really don't. I think that all levels of government need to contribute more money to arts and culture because, in fact, it's doing more to make our lives better than a lot of other things.
Of course, and we all agree on that. So I guess then my final, just for clarification, because we clearly, as we bring in our new managing director, we develop this new strategy. You're going to be at the table along with many of other speakers today. I mean, Norm's here to speak about Push, one of our most diverse festivals that we have in the city, exciting opportunities. But around the funding, I'll have staff double check, but the most per capita is based on is the annual granting fund, but we'll double check the accuracy of that statement, not on a accumulation over years. And we're low in the provincial, so I'm really hoping that you have a chance to make some very public statements, as we do whenever we have the opportunity, that the province needs to step up. We are doing a lot as a city, always opportunity to do more, absolutely, but boy, oh boy, Councillor Meggs has mentioned other cities in the region. The province is not at the table.
There's no question that the province needs to step up, and yes, we are. I am preparing a presentation for different ministers about that, and hoping to get something. And I do know the budget, the cultural budget for the city of Surrey is only $300,000.
Right, and we've got over 11 million in operating grants alone, plus 12 million out of engineering and parks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I know, and you know, everything. It's very much appreciated what the city is doing. Don't get me wrong. My job is to fight for artists because they live in poverty.
Also, our housing programs are also important to you. So it would be interesting to also include the investments we're making in housing as part of supporting the arts.
Yes, we could.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Councillor Affleck. Well, I wouldn't include that if I were you. I'm glad you're here. You know, this is my 6th budget, and this is the first time aggressively the arts community have come out to us. And you know, the squeaky wheel, as they say, sometimes gets the oil.
That's why they hired me.
Yeah. I just want to, you know, what took you guys so long? Why now? Why suddenly? I mean, I have been saying that I felt that there's been the city of Vancouver and some of my fellow councillors are saying, whoa, we're the greatest city in the world, we fund so much money, we're the best, we're the best. Clearly we're not, according to you. You can see that my fellow councillors are on the defensive on this issue, which is always fun.
Speak for yourself.
Oh,
it's up to you.
All right. Well, I just wanted to just clarify. But what took you guys so long? Why are you suddenly here asking for more money?
You know, I don't know. I mean, I've been a poor, struggling artist, and, you know, I've been working in the sector, as I said, for quite a long time. And so, you know, I'm nearing retirement age, but I can't afford to retire. So, you know, I wanted to come back to Vancouver, and I believe so deeply in the arts and their value that I thought that maybe I could be a voice for that. And I am outspoken. I'm known for that. So perhaps they just haven't had people who are outspoken enough. Although I think Heather's pretty outspoken.
I'm not going to comment on that. You guys can fight about that afterwards. Just to clarify, the numbers you talked about, because I looked at the page again, it's the grants awarded to cultural organizations. You said they went up, they went down, the other went up.
There's been a 2% increase.
Well, it's interesting because I looked at it going, well, which is it? And so in 2012, it was 220 organizations. And then by 2015, it was 264. So it went 220, 225, 235, 264. Then just last year, dropped to 261. So, I mean, that's 3, but it's gone from 220 to 260. So that's a significant jump in organization. So I get that argument.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, I'm confused by the numbers, what you're asking. You say 20%, 2.2 million.
No,
800,000.
Yeah.
What?
2.2 million is, you know, 20% of 11 million.
That's your ask on the grant program.
Well, I'm asking that more for core funding, but that was a directive that came from the ACPC. You know, that's what their strategy was, and we want to present a united front.
So for Vancouver specifically, that was their ask.
Yeah.
You mentioned the data, and I guess is that Stats Canada data that you're referring to? That was from 2006 and old data that's being used as proof, or was it?
Yes, I believe it was. It was a 5-municipality study of 5 major Canadian cities that put Vancouver #1 from the statistics from 2006 to 2009.
And you're saying we're not #1 anymore, so who is? And I don't think we can include Montreal.
I can't tell you that right now, but I'll look for it. I'll let you know.
I think that would be helpful. And then we heard about the province. I bet you the provincial government will say they are the best funder. You know, generally, quite often governments in power will say they're best at everything.
They couldn't claim that.
Just so you, I think it would be good because you're in this chamber here when numbers are being thrown around. I would be interested to know, province, federal. You know, from our point of view, when we're deciding on our budgets, where do we fit into the landscape? Not only city to city, major cities, and then provincially, where do we fit in? And I know it's not easy to do apples to apples because we have the rental program, we have other stuff. You could throw in housing if you want. So I think it would be helpful for us to make a decision on a lot of money if we actually had proper data, not only on what we're doing and what other cities, but what the province and federal government are doing.
That's part of the problem, is that there's not enough money for research. I mean, even Canadian Heritage, who does the research with something called the Cultural Satellite Account, they use the stats from Stats Canada. Alliance is a part of that. But even they don't have the money that they need to do the kind of research they need to do. It's not something that is being invested in because artists are struggling just to, you know, balance their budgets and live.
Right. Okay. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Those are your questions. Thanks for your advocacy. Next we have on the speakers list, David Jordan. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. A little anecdotal information on you know, where the arts are being funded and what it looks like for an operating client, where I'm the executive director for the Vancouver Fringe Festival, one of the city's major cultural events. A decade ago, when I took on the executive director role at the Fringe, we were receiving $35,000 as a grant from the city. Now, 10 years later, we receive a grant of $40,000. That's a very tiny incremental increase over time, but our organization has grown exponentially. Our overall budget has grown 50%. Our attendance has doubled. We've achieved all this progress with grit, hard work, employment grants, an enormous engagement from a volunteer corps of 500 who do over 12,000 hours of work per year. We, like all our arts colleagues, are incredibly resourceful and determined, but we need to report the realities of this sector to you. And perhaps in response to the question, why has it taken us so long? We're in the trenches, so we having the time to then do advocacy when we're just trying to do operations is difficult. The infrastructure of an arts community is its people. We need to be able to keep up with rising costs of venues, to pay our staff living wages to survive in this very expensive city, and above all, we need to create opportunities and conditions that reflect the value we hold for art and artists. The success that I report was largely achieved by a high staff retention rate. And I've been blessed with a culture of loyalty and dedication in our organization because I assure you, staff retention is not based on the salaries that we would be deemed competitive in other sectors. Despite the success we have had, when I say fringe in Vancouver, I sometimes have to explain. When I say fringe in Edmonton, everyone nods their heads and smiles. And to compare some cities, the fringe in Edmonton is deeply rooted in civic life and it is funded accordingly. And Edmonton brands itself as a city of festivals and has a living document and a goal of funding all festivals at 12% of their budget. The Edmonton fringe has a ticketed attendance of over 120,000. This is more than triple the attendance of the Vancouver Fringe Festival. Our current city funding is about 4% of our annual budget. The Vancouver Fringe, like all fringes in Canada, allows anyone to participate. We have a unique programming structure called a hat. We literally draw our acts out of the hat, and that means the value at the core of our operation is participation. People ask me how that could work. The proof is in the pudding. We've been growing steadily for 32 years. People want to participate in art. This year we had a record-breaking 290 artists apply, but even after the 32 years of our success, our organization needs to grow. We need to seek to increase diversity and inclusivity. How could we be more inclusive than offering anyone the opportunity to put their name in the hat? Well, we are about to embark on a major program to investigate this question. We will find those who are not participating and find out why. We will ask ourselves what barriers people face, and we will work to change. We will do the work to give Vancouverites the Fringe Festival they deserve, a festival that represents them. So we are calling on all our funders, private and public, to help make us progress. Not for the hundreds of artists who participate annually or for the thousands of patrons who call us Vancouver's best performing arts festival, but for those artists who aren't participating but should be. For those audience members who have yet to discover the transformative experience of theater. We need public investment to make sure that Vancouver gets the Fringe Festival it deserves. Increased public funding will allow for arts organizations to make progress, not just sustain operations, which is also clearly an issue for us, and to take root in all our communities and to mean more to more Vancouverites. I've given you a snapshot of our organization, and it is similar throughout the arts community. People dedicating their lives to enriching society for very little pay because we know that the arts are worth it. The arts will bring us together, make our communities stronger, and make Vancouver's civic life richer. Please consider increasing the budget for arts and culture. It will pay off. Thank you.
We have some questions. First from Councillor Affleck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm curious to know, you talked about the 12%, I think it was Edmonton. Where was that, the 12%?
It's Edmonton, yeah.
I mean, how does that work when it's, you're an established festival, for example, but there are maybe a startup festival. And if a startup festival were to get suddenly 12% and you're sitting there fighting for your 12%, do you see it as an equal playing field with a startup versus an established, or vice versa? They might say, why are you still getting 12% if I'm a startup? I mean, how do you, if you're established, you should have other revenue, you have sponsors, you have all this other money coming in that a startup wouldn't have.
Sure, but even when you're established, we're still trying to achieve growth. So when you're established, it doesn't, things don't level off. So what I'm talking about right now is trying to level up what we're currently offering the city of Vancouver. So and in terms of our organization, we're an organization that we're an incubator for independent artists. So in terms of equal playing field, we are a playing field for those kind of artists. So,
right. Yeah. That's the word fringe. But if you have, you said 4% you're from the city of Vancouver is what you're...
That's correct.
And you've seen growth, is that percentage changed because you've grown on the other side of your financials, or?
Yeah, we have achieved that through an increase in other sources of income, earned revenue, and private sector.
Right. So there is an argument that could be made that we lift you up at some point, but once you're, maybe established is not the right word, but you have a growth momentum on your own without the support of as much support.
You could make that argument if you didn't want to support the growth of the festival. But I think everybody's got to be on board in order to achieve progress.
I appreciate you.
If you just wanted to sustain operations, which is what we're doing, we sustain operations very well. But if you want to achieve growth, we sustain operations very well at a very shoestring level that, as I mentioned, revolves around a huge amount of volunteer hours, revolves around staff being paid, underpaid. So we sustain those operations, but we still aspire to growth. So if you want us to, if you want to see this festival grow up, and Vancouver is still very much an adolescent city in terms of its arts and culture community. If you want this city to grow up, then you got to fund it.
I appreciate you coming in. I look forward to your further involvement. And I think it's complicated, information. I think knowing how to fund, and is there a one size fits all or not, or so I appreciate your information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Those are your questions. Next speaker we have is Anita Romaniak. No, she's right there. Good afternoon. Welcome back.
Yes. As I'm sure all of you know, I am a former Parks Commissioner, and I have kept active on parks issues for the last quarter of a century. I'm also currently the president of the Mount Pleasant Community Center Association. When I was on Park Board, we had about 11.5% of the city's budget. It's currently about 9.5%. And I know that some of that has been achieved by shared services, so that these haven't actually been cut. But I also do know that the Park Board's budget has become increasingly tight. And even though I have not been a park commissioner for 11 years, I still have had complaints from the public asking me what they should do. A lot of it has been with respect to park maintenance and washrooms. I've been telling them in recent years to phone 311. But I'm very glad to see that there is more going into sanitation and cleanup. But I think it goes beyond that. I know that there has been a decrease in some staff. The Park Board trying to find efficiencies and do more and less. Some positions are unfilled. And I know that the Park Board has had to do this because of the level of their budget. But when it gets to the point when the public is making complaints, I think more needs to be done. Because of my position as, I just wanted to say I do support not only the increase in sanitation staff, but also washrooms. The Park Board ask for washrooms, I think, is well deserved. I've been hearing about washrooms since I was on the Park Board. I really think in the next capital budget you have to look at even more money for washrooms, because it's one of the biggest complaints that the Park Board gets, never mind the rest of the city. Community centers, you've been talking about downloading from senior levels of government. We have had downloading onto our own budgets as community center associations. And that is in order to keep what they're called level 1 staff. They usually staff the reception desks to keep the hours going, and also trying to keep 2 people on the desk at any one time. We have been asked by the park board to contribute, which means that we are either facing increasing fees in order to fund our contribution to these level 1 staff, or else cutting hours. And it's an inequitable situation, because some park board or some community center associations, and I know this from meeting with a lot of them over the past few months on these joint operating agreement consultations, some of them can't afford it. It means that hours have to be cut, and that is less service to the community. It also means that if you do increase the fees to keep it open, you have to charge more to the public, and we try to keep things affordable. And my own association, in fact, will offer subsidies beyond the leisure access. Mount Pleasant so far has been able to do this, but not all community associations can afford to do this. So that if you're downloading on the community associations, it means often that if they have to increase fees, it downloads it again once more on the public, or else it decreases services. I really think that sometimes some people think Parks and Recreation are a frill. It is not. It contributes not only to the livability of our city, but it also helps people both physically and mentally healthy. And that is something that if you don't have that when you're a child, it has repercussions for the next 6, 7, 8 decades. So I'm just saying that this year and beyond, I think the park board section of your budget, whatever else, should never be cut back any more than it is, and possibly increased in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You have questions from Councillor DiGenova.
Thank you very much for coming, former Commissioner Armagnac. Both, as you know, Councillor.
You'll need to stand.
Oh, yes, my apologies. We do not usually hear from speakers in council. It's usually committees. So when I'm speaking to someone, I'm usually sitting down. So my apologies for that. Thank you for the reminder, Mr. Chair. I did want to ask you, in your experience, and you had mentioned that you had heard about accessible washrooms even back in your, washrooms back in your time on the park board. Was there a need, would you say, expressed for accessible washrooms?
Yes, because some of the washrooms are pretty old and they weren't exactly accessible. It certainly has improved, and certainly as we add more new community centers, they always have accessible washrooms. But there is retrofitting to be done, and certainly in also the outside ones. So yeah, that is certainly a need.
Thank you. And then also, as we heard from the park board chair earlier, and regarding her request on behalf of the board for a possible increase in budget, I understand that you also are the president of the Mount Pleasant Community Center, and in hearing a councillor here state that they personally wish that fees were increased above the 2%, could you comment on whether or not you feel that families, I suppose you could only comment on Mount Pleasant, could bear that?
Councillor DiGenova, the comment was inaccurate. The comment was that if revenue could be higher than 2%, then he would be open to it. It's not that fees would be higher. Oh. So let's just be accurate if we're quoting what other councillors are saying.
Okay, I will go and look that up on the
Yes,
tape,
please do
but I
so.
did write that down.
It would be preferable, though, to focus on what the delegation has presented, and you've asked for clarifying questions of what the delegation has spoken to.
I did. I was asking about what, as you had talked about the burden on the community center associations, but also on affordability for people trying to access the community centers. Sorry if I wasn't clear.
Well, I would say that any fee, either our fees or fees charged directly by the park board, which would be rinks, pools, any increase in the fee can be a burden. You do have the leisure access program, which helps for very low income people, but it's often the people who are on the margins who aren't, don't fit the kind of poverty level, but are struggling. I mean, we all know how expensive Vancouver is, that any increase in fees comes out of what is often a very limited home budget to start out with.
And you talked about a good start for youth and for families, especially, and how the community centers foster that, both through Park Board and the partnership with the community center associations. I was hoping you might be able to elaborate a little bit on, trying to work back up. I'm not sure specifically how Mount Pleasant was affected. Perhaps you could tell me. But I understand 500 hours were cut back in 2013, and youth workers were also eliminated. Number of positions across the board at Park Board. Did you see any difference or affect the community centers during that time?
Well, Mount Pleasant in particular, we had a couple of good years at the very beginning of the new one opening because Trout Lake was under construction. So we had a surplus build up in that time. And we also, in the subsequent 2 years, had a reasonable surplus from the child care programs. So we were able to absorb, we were able to pay for those hours. But a center like Strathcona, which subsists almost on grant money because their catchment area is not high income, has been much less able to do that. What has happened now with us, we are in a move to a less high income area. There's a lot of people who are not wealthy in those older apartment buildings, often low income. And we are no longer earning such a surplus. And we have also reviewed our child care and discovered that we were really paying less than we should be, especially given Vancouver's income. When we're trying to get our child care workers up to living wage level. We need a couple more increases to get all of them there, but we're working on that. It also helps with morale and retention. And child care is about 2/3 at least of our budget, so that if we try to keep our child care fees low. If we have to raise fees in order to do that, then we hit parents who can ill afford increased fees in childcare, and it's a huge section of our own programming and budget, and we don't want to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That's your questions, and thank you for being here very much.
For the consultation.
You bet. Thanks, Ms. Romaniuk. Okay, we're on to speaker number 7, Malcolm Levy. Is Malcolm here? Saw him earlier, but we can come back in case he's still nearby. The next speaker is Caitlin Jones from the Western Front Society. Welcome.
It's me again. Malcolm left.
He did. Okay.
He did. I have written here, good morning, but it's clearly the afternoon. This has been a really eye-opening experience for me, the budget and all these incredibly difficult issues that we have facing us. So most of you know me, some of you don't. My name's Caitlin Jones. I'm Executive Director of the Western Front Society. I've stood here a number of times, most recently to thank the Mayor and Council for allocating $1.5 million of a community amenity contribution to the Western Front so that we could purchase our building and secure our place as Canada's oldest artist-run center. It was a singular opportunity that we are very grateful for. But I've been encouraged to come here today from the Alliance and for arts and culture to advocate for something less singular but equally important, which is funding for the annual cultural operating assistance. I'm bringing my own concerns forward as the director of the Western Front, but also the concerns of my Artist Run Center colleagues who, in some cruel irony, are writing their operating grants, which are due today. So that's why not many other people are here. So I think it's fair to say for the last 30 or 40 years, artist-run centers have generated a volume and share of cultural activity in this city that is definitely out of proportion to their budget size. One of the very first things in the budget today was a pillar or a hope, which was to get value for money. And I think artist-run centers definitely do that for the city. We serve diverse publics and foster international cultural relationships. We consistently address issues of social justice, inclusion, homelessness, and to that end, a large majority of our programs are completely free to the public. We consistently fund the critically engaged practices that have resulted in Vancouver's incredible international reputation as a city for art, and we always do it on shoestring budgets, driven by passion and community and a belief that art really matters. So most artist-run centers operate with budgets of about $200,000 to $900,000, and as I said before, I consider them to be punching well above their weight in terms of impact. So for an example, Western Front is at the top end of this budget range, and our city operating funds currently comes in at approximately 4% of our annual revenues. But despite consistent positive feedback from our community and cultural services, this percentage point has decreased every year since 2009, the last time we received a significant increase in our annual operating assistance. Other artist-run centers and indeed arts organizations across the city, as you've heard from the Fringe Festival, are experiencing similar sort of de facto decreases because the fact is that our operating grants do not come close to keeping pace with the rapid increases of costs of living and working in Vancouver. Most of us are lucky enough to receive specific project funding, CAC contribution, cultural infrastructure money, but most often these funds are not allowed to be spent on operational line items like rent, and most critically, operational salaries. Similarly, special funds that have been allocated to mural festivals, public art, and other special events, while they most definitely contribute to the cultural life of the city, they have little lasting impact on the long-standing institutions and cultural workers who have given so much to the cultural life of this city. Operating funds, as you know, they're essential to pay people. Not only the artists, musicians, and dancers who produce the work, but also the curators, directors, and assistants who make sure it is seen and shared locally, nationally, and internationally. None of us took jobs in the arts to get rich, that's for sure, but we do deserve to be paid a living wage, and this is increasingly hard to manage. I really applaud the city's decision to pay its employees in accordance with Vancouver's living wage. This is a super meaningful and a positive step. Additionally, I think City Council has been very receptive and understanding to the arts and culture sector, and so I strongly urge you, and I realize increasingly that without any cultural services staff to back us up, it's very hard to make a recommendation to the mayor and council as to how we would actually manage to increase this budget at this time. But I strongly urge you to consider increasing operating funds so that we as directors and curators and culture workers are able to do the same thing for our own employees and for the artists that live in Vancouver. That's all.
All right. Thank you very much. Councillor Meggs has questions for you.
Just one, Ms. Jones, because you raised it so directly, which is the living wage. When the living wage policy was adopted, one of the concerns was from some councillors that if applied to the arts community, it would be devastating in the sense that it would eat up or compete with other expenditures that the arts community might make with those funds. In other words, we were trying to clarify whether or not the city could or would be interested in requiring the paying of the living wage by arts organizations. So is the proposition that the city would make its grants large enough to guarantee everybody would get the living wage, or are arts organizations saying we're agreeing collectively to pay the living wage and now we're going to go try to find the resources for that? Because right now we're not the main funder for many organizations, so I'm not sure why it would I'm just trying to figure out, because there's a lot of nonprofits and corporate sector outfits out there that are making a living wage commitment and then implementing it, and we're just part of a funder. We haven't historically funded wages to a given level. So I'm just trying to clarify that part.
Well, as I mentioned, the city accounts for 4% of our annual operating. So clearly I'm not asking the city to pay so that we can pay living wage. But surely that is a goal for all of us. And that's certainly a goal in my sector, which is that people don't get a job at the Western Front without a master's degree. And am I really going to ask that person to work for $16 an hour? It's no longer acceptable in any way to expect people to do the work we expect them to do for that amount of money. So what we're saying to you, to the province, to what Canada Council is responding to in their coming budget for 2017, 18 and on, is that this is a real issue. And so we all have to collectively work together to get people working $21, $22 an hour.
Yeah, no, I think we agree on the outcome, but I just worry about how we're going to get there. And if we bring it into this discussion, we have to bring it in a clear way, because I guess to put my thoughts in a question, how would the city meaningfully contribute to a living wage? Would it be through cash contributions directed to wages, or would it, and how would that fit with the other proposition we had that ticket prices should perhaps be free for certain income groups?
I think what we're talking about is people who work in what I'm speaking about, I'll speak to that first, is we're talking about people who work in the culture industry. What we're asking for, we're majority of us, and maybe Councillor Deal can speak to this, or you too, we're very good managers of money. So what we're asking for is an increase to operating, and then me and my colleagues who are good managers of money will then allocate the resources to increase staff salaries. I mean, I don't see why it would have to be put aside in a special thing to go. It's like, if we can increase overall operating budgets through provincial funding, federal funding, city funding, earned revenues, donations, we should be able to do that.
But I guess, will the arts community in Metro Vancouver set a living wage for its people as a goal that it will support through its funding sources? Because that's I guess, the core of my question.
PARC, is the Pacific Association of Artist-Run Centers, has already announced that as not a requirement, but as a goal moving forward. And these are we receive the smallest amounts of funding from all the public, from the other public institutions in the city. I think there's a point of clarification, and oh, Councillor Reimer is back. Is this this number that was 18% increase over the last 7 years? And I guess I would like some clarification on that as to whether that includes all these other special project funding. Because I think we're all here talking very specifically about operating this one particular program of the large number of cultural services and programs that the city has implemented.
I don't have any further questions, thanks.
Okay, that's your questions. Thanks very much for being here. And next up is Heather Redfern, who is the Executive Director of the Culch. Good
Hello,
afternoon.
and thank you so much. Well, I bet you know what I'm here to talk about. I think it's really important, especially when we've had a morning listening to the damages that are happening in our society, on our streets, in our city, to remember that what the arts does is provide an essential service, a public service. The arts is an investment in health and wellness and healing. And while it is very important to react to emergencies and to crises, it is also very, very important to invest in wellness and health and healing. And the arts are a part of that part of the equation. So I think what I want to just tell you about is some of the things that you have missed out on by not significantly funding the operating program. We are doing a production called Children of God. This is a wonderful musical produced by Urban Inc. Urban Inc. receives $27,000 a year in operating funding from the city. They have been active in the city for 20 years, and they are the most important company in terms of moving forward a conversation around the arts and Indigenous artists and artists of diversity. $27,000 a year. I'm sorry, but it just breaks my heart. And Children of God, which will open at the National Arts Centre after playing at the York Theatre in Vancouver on National Aboriginal Day in 2017, will receive this much money from the city. This is a missed opportunity. Can you imagine if you had contributed and were able to brand yourself with this production on National Aboriginal Day in the Canadian capital? You've missed an opportunity. I think that Little Red Riding Hood, the East Van Panto, is doing more for bike lanes in the city right now than any campaign you could ever run. It's really fun, it's really cool, and it's really progressive. There was also an opportunity that I would have loved to have taken advantage of if we had more operating funding. It's the Zeus production, the pipeline project. I would have loved to be able to have the culture participate in that discussion, that public discussion that we have all been having and needing to have, but there was no funding. There was no way I could do it. These are the opportunities that you're missing. The Cultures operating grant from the city has increased by $5,000 since 2010. $5,000. It's 3% of our budget of $3.2 million. And I get frustrated when I hear statistics being thrown around. They're not apples to apples. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. I am honoring our collective agreement. My salaries have increased by 10% over the last 5 years, whereas my operating funding from the city has increased by 4% over the last 6 years. So while this inflationary increase might be happening, it's not being passed on to the organizations that are really at the core of the arts community in Vancouver. And you know, we are the ones that support emerging artists. The space that we operate on behalf of the city, we give away free all summer for residencies for artists creating new works. And we don't curate that. It's first come, first serve. I would love to give them some money to be able to support those residencies, but I can't do that. All I can do is give them space. So there's a lot of things that need to happen. I think one of the reasons we're all here is we are at a tipping point. Like, it's getting really difficult out there. So I just think that it's important for you guys to know that waiting another year until you put a city manager in place and they can put a process in place and there can be a consultation and then there can be a plan isn't really the best idea. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. You got Councillor Carr with questions first.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for speaking to us and speaking so passionately to the issue. So I'm hearing that there are sort of different requests for the money in terms of an increase in $2.2 million overall for arts and culture funding. Some of it is just around core sustainability of organizations, so operating budgets. But in listening to you, I also got the feeling that there were other opportunities, things like residencies or sort of innovative new projects. And so I'm wondering if you can just speak to if the need is more diverse. Mostly everybody so far has talked about operating budgets and they just thought, you know, people's salaries haven't gone up and expenses have risen and that kind of thing. But could you speak about the different sort of avenues? And I'm sorry, it would be Councillors Deal or Ball who would know more specifically about the current grants. I'm not so up on it, but whether there are some new pots or new, or is what you're asking for already covered and we just need to increase those budgets?
Operating funds, especially for organizations like the Fringe or the Cult or Push, where we are dealing with multiple layers of artists and artists of various stages of their careers and that kind of thing. Operating funds not only pay our staff salaries and our utility bills, but they also allow us to properly support those artists. And that's what I'm talking about. The city doesn't need to invent programs to support artists. The very best thing is to fund the organizations you're already funding properly so that we can do the job ourselves. We're way better at it than bureaucrats. I'm sorry, we're way better at it. It's what we do. We're the experts.
Okay, so that's consistent with what everybody else been saying. All right.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, that's all your questions. Thank you very much for being here, Ms. Redfern. And we're on to Stephen Drover, Artistic Director of the Rumble Theatre, followed by Norman Armour.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and council members. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Stephen Drover. I'm the Artistic Director of Rumble Theatre. It's an independent, nonprofit arts organization that has been creating and initiating arts events in Vancouver for over 25 years. And I'm speaking to you today as an artist and a leader in a nonprofit arts organization. This is my first time addressing council. I've never been here before. But I'm here today to support my colleagues in the arts community, and because I believe very strongly in the need to increase operating funding for arts organizations. The amount of support that council has shown to arts projects in the past, especially the generous increase in 2007 and the subsequent special programs that have been funded, including the mural project, are tremendously appreciated. But support on the core operating level to nonprofit organizations greater fuels the machine that drives our industry and supplies the talent that is needed to create the art and make our city a better place to live. Part of what Rumble does includes a mentorship program in which we foster the development of theater artists in the early stages of their careers. So basically, we foster meaningful interactions between emerging and established artists. So many of the emerging artists we work with have graduated from one of the 6 post-secondary training institutions in the Lower Mainland that offer specialized training in theater. We help them negotiate the gap years between graduation and professional work in a variety of ways. Currently, we have well over 100 emerging artists taking advantage of our mentorship activities, and Rumble has been instrumental over the years in jump-starting the careers of many artists, some of whom have gone on to become major players and leaders in the arts community. Along with the plays that Rumble produces and the scripts we commission, our mentorship program is one of the cornerstones of our core operations. It's about developing artists and fueling the community. It's important, it's special, and it's business as usual. This work we do is just one example of how nonprofit arts organizations supply the talent that makes our city so vibrant. This is really to say that all nonprofit arts organizations perform remarkable business as usual that feeds our culture and grows our community. The arts sector has always been a green industry that reuses and recycles our resources. In addition to making remarkable artwork, we grow and foster the workforce that help make Vancouver a creative, imaginative, and exciting city. Nonprofits cultivate and supply the talent for the entire cultural industry, and it is critical that operating funding be increased so that this vital step in the ecology of our arts community doesn't go slack, so that arts organizations can buttress the city cultural profile more effectively, can lay more solid groundwork for the world-class artists we are creating, and can more expertly respond to the needs of our artists and the community we love and serve. I believe that the arts have proven time and again to be a successful catalyst in helping people understand their neighbors, appreciate their community, and respect their city just a little bit more. I believe these are the fundamental qualities we all want to inspire in the citizens of Vancouver, and this is the payoff that comes with an investment in operating funding for arts organizations. I encourage you to please consider an increase. I want you to know that I and my peers are appreciative of all the work that you do, and I thank you for hearing me on this critical issue.
Okay, thank you very much for being here to share with council, and no questions. Next up is Norman Armour, followed by Louise Leclerc. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'll try and keep to my script, better to keep on time. With all sincerity, thank you, Mayor and councillors, for this opportunity, for this 5 minutes of your valued time. I thought long and hard on the question of what I might speak to you about. Many of these mornings and this afternoon speakers are far more knowledgeable than me, more researched, more articulate, more ready with the facts and figures on the value, scope, vitality, and ultimate impact of our nonprofit art sector. This has never been my personal strength. arguing for the value of the arts. To completely be honest, I don't think anyone can be convinced that the arts are worthy of anyone's time or any institution's investment. And I know that in this regard I may differ from many of my colleagues and many of those who, to put it bluntly, should be convinced. But the fact is, you either believe in the value of the arts or you don't. There are far easier ways to make a buck. There are far more demonstrable ways to affect social change. And there are far more spectacular ways to put on a show or host a celebration. Now, it's not that I don't believe that the arts are an engine of our city's economy or that it's central to our sense of civic identity, indeed, to our very sense of being human, and that it's at the heart of Vancouver's livability quotient, or that our vibrant art scene, renowned the world over, has some of the most imaginative, ingenious, bold, fierce, innovative, acclaimed, and trend-setting artists to be found anywhere. No, I believe these things. And for the sake of this time here and now, I'm going to assume that you do too. I'm going to assume that you also believe that for a nonprofit arts and cultural sector to truly flourish, it needs not only its wits and its wiles, but it also needs public investment that is commensurate with its stature, its labor, and its output. I'm going to assume that there is an Office of Cultural Services because you believe it has an important, and I dare say critical, role to play in the city's art scene. And I'm going to assume that if its financial resources, its budget, were not adequate or up to the job, that this would be of real concern to you. Enough concern to take action to remedy the situation. Lastly, I'm going to assume that because I have to assume that if it were revealed to you that increases of an inflationary 2% annually for the past several years were affecting real damage on our arts community, that you would be alarmed to learn what it has meant to our beloved and celebrated arts milieu to have this type of stagnated level of support. I can't speak to you what it means to individual artists or to venues or to galleries or to designers or stage managers or technical directors or administrators. I can't even speak to what it might mean to a young individual at the start of a professional career in the arts, considering the very same question that I and members of my generation did way back in 1990. Namely, do I stay, stick it out, or should I simply move to Toronto or Montreal, New York or Berlin or Paris? What I can speak to you, however, is to what it has done to my own organization, the Push International Performing Arts Festival. This is what it has meant. We have hit a glass ceiling. After 8 years of rapid growth, our annual budget is frozen. It has not risen above the $1.8 million ledge for some time and will not for the foreseeable future without any additional investment. We are full of plans, full of strategic intents and organizational goals, but lack the core financial means to achieve them. We are simply undercapitalized. We are losing staff because we don't have the monies to properly reward their work. We are losing them to other more lucrative sectors, such as the film industry, health, digital animation, and the like. We are losing them as they simply leave the city because they can no longer afford to live here, nor can they see a future coming anywhere near being described as promising. We are losing out on opportunities to grow our donor base because we are unable to attract the type of qualified fundraising individuals necessary if one is to successfully attract the philanthropic support that is so necessary for our business model to actually work. At Push, we are unable to grow our audience base and consequently our capacity to generate box office revenue because we lack the monies to carry out a communications plan that would allow us to both target segmented audiences and raise our public profile among the wider public. The Push Festival attracts well over 50 million earned media impressions a year. That's reviews, previews, and the like, through the media's coverage. And yet we lack the basic resources, i.e. cash, to attract corporate sponsors because we lack the monies for a proper paid advertising campaign that would deliver the kind of ROI they expect. 2 more paragraphs. The consequences of a stagnating budget on a festival such as Push has other effects. As with staff salaries and remuneration for freelance contractors, our fees to the artists we present are a good 20% below what they should be. And that's a number I've actually spoken about for years, not just because of the recent requests for increases to the operational budget. We are no longer a scrappy startup and can no longer plead organizational usefulness or naivety or therefore are losing our bargaining power in the marketplace to attract talent both on and off the stage. Why am I here today? Why are so many of us here today? I think for me, probably the best metaphor is the lobster one. It's feeling a little warm in here. We can weather such conditions for a period of time. I know this because in our growing years, we face challenges, well, that were just as daunting. And I know this because this is the very thing we have been doing for the past several years, weathering the conditions. What I also know is that we cannot continue to. It is unsustainable.
Okay, thank you very much for being here. Yeah. Don't have any questions from council for you.
Okay.
Appreciate your voice and all the efforts of your great work at Push. And next up is Louise Leclerc, the treasurer of the Vancouver Moving Theatre.
Well, quite the passion to follow up with, I must say. Thank you, Mayor and councillors. It's my pleasure to speak to you in support of increased operating funds within the cultural services of Vancouver. My name is Louise Leclerc, and I'm the treasurer of Vancouver Moving Theatre Society. Vancouver Moving Theatre is an award-winning downtown east side-based arts organization that works passionately with people of the downtown east side to create interdisciplinary productions that give voice to our community. In this capacity, Vancouver Moving Theatre also produces, with over 50 community partners, the annual flagship Downtown East Side Heart of the City Festival. A highlight of the recent 2016 festival was the installation of the Survivors Totem Pole in Pigeon Park. The installation of this pole, carved by Bernie Williams of the Haida Nation, was realized with the significant and vital support of the city in a powerful act of reconciliation. We call it moving forward in a good way. Vancouver Moving Theatre provides a powerful and vital service to the city. We build bridges and connections. We give voice to our city and to its citizens. We enliven the life of our city, its people and institutions, and we provide hope and meaning. We tackle burning issues of the day and grapple with hard questions. We profile the diverse cultures and heritage of our city. We support a healthy city, an engaged city, a city of reconciliation. Vancouver Moving Theatre is able to produce our work with the essential and much appreciated support of the City of Vancouver, particularly through cultural services. This funding enables us to create productions and festivals and to support our city and its cultural life. It provides fees for hundreds of local artists and downtown Eastside residents. It allows us to employ a core team of 7 cultural workers. Yet producing our work in Vancouver has become a challenge over the last decade, as you've heard from others. Housing and living costs in our city have risen dramatically over the last decade. We're not only challenged to retain our employees, but to develop and implement our programs and activities. The concern is real. Vancouver Moving Theatre is losing employees and potential employees because they can't afford to live here, or because we simply cannot afford to improve their wages. How do we increase salaries and fees and living wages without having to cut personnel and programs? Quite simply, we can't. Vancouver Moving Theatre Society strongly supports the City of Arts and Cultural Policy Council recommendation that funding to cultural services be increased. If in turn, Vancouver Moving Theatre is awarded an increase from cultural services, we would direct this much needed additional support towards our employees, programs, and community, and continue building activity in the downtown east side. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. We appreciate the City of Vancouver's ongoing support of Vancouver arts sector, Vancouver Moving Theatre, and the downtown east side community. Thank you.
Thanks very much for being here today. And our next speaker is Naomi Singer. who's here from the Secret Lantern Society. Welcome back.
Hello. This is actually my first time ever being here. Public speaking is not my strong point. I feel extremely moved by everything I've heard here today from absolutely everybody, and so much of it, safety, downtown east side, everything from my arts colleagues has been incredibly moving. I'm going to stick to my script, but there's so much more now that I wish I could say. So thank you for listening to us all today. I'm Naomi Singer, Artistic Director of the Secret Lantern Society, and I'm here obviously to speak as an advocate for the increased funding for the Operating Grants Program of the Cultural Services Department. As some of you may know, the Secret Lantern Society created and continues to produce the annual Winter Solstice Lantern Festival, now in its 23rd year. What you most likely do not know is that throughout those 2 decades, we've had to move our production studio 6 times. That's an average of 1 move every 4 years. It's exhausting. It's also kind of comical, but that's the fringe play that I'm someday going to do. Each move represents an enormous drain in our resources, human, financial, and emotional. I know this is true for other groups as well, and none of us can do our best work under these circumstances. Our festival, my festival, takes place 2 weeks from today. I've brought some promotional materials should anybody wish to attend the festival. So while I need to be preparing for that, I feel it's important for me to be here today and tell you directly of Secret Lantern Society's current situation. Just 2 weeks ago, we received a 1-month eviction notice to vacate, to vacate our current space on December 31st. That's just 10 days after our festival, and that's also New Year's Eve. When I pointed this out to the building manager, he granted us an extension until January 14th, when the power will be cut. Bearing in mind that I have 5 minutes, suffice it to say that this presents an enormous challenge for our small not-for-profit society. When we moved into the building, we knew it was destined to be demolished for development eventually, and we gambled that we would have enough time there to regroup and seek out a more stable and secure space. However, we've been there for 2 years, and in that time we've suffered 2 floods. The first took place just 1 week after we moved in and was caused by an electrician hired by the owners who attempted to run wiring through a metal hook, which was in fact a sprinkler head. The second flood took place only 7 weeks ago, the result of heavy rains that accumulated on the roof and formed a lake around the blocked drains until the water gushed down through multiple points in the unmaintained roof. Ironically, I believe this lack of maintenance in the building hastened the permit process for redevelopment of this site. So, last night, I was very grateful to click the submit button on our application for annual assistance from the Cultural Services Department. And I'm truly grateful for the support we have received over the years. However, last night, after submitting our application, I could not tear myself away from my computer and the horrifying reports coming out of Oakland, California, of the studio space and the 36 artists and musicians who lost their lives in that catastrophic fire. Not to over-dramatize, but I have to tell you that in my search for a new production studio, I have seen places that look very much like the images of the Oakland warehouse before the fire. And I've been meeting with building managers who believe they are helping artists and not-for-profit people and musicians by carving up unusual buildings into multiple studios that will certainly operate under the radar. The building from which we are being evicted was no different, and I know we took a considerable risk being there. I'd like to add that I really appreciate the efforts of city staff who have forwarded me information regarding city-operated spaces, and we are making efforts to secure those. However, due to the urgency of our eviction, we may need to accept a temporary and compromised solution. Sadly, that's what affordability in this city for artists looks like. So I urge you to increase your support for the Operating Grants Program. It is essential for the organizational stability of cultural groups that have so much creative energy to offer our city. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Singer, for being here.
And I hope you'll come to the festival. Despite everything, we try to create something that's really beautiful and meaningful to people. It's not just another day on the calendar for us. And the thing that sustains me is the hundreds of letters we get from people in the community and people talking to us, to me, on the street and on the seawall saying, thank you so much for this. And people's, we can't guarantee the outcome of what's going to happen for people at the festival, but we have had people literally change the course of their lives by walking through the 600 pure beeswax candle labyrinth. And that's what we do. We provide a beautiful space for people to interact together. And we want to keep doing that. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Thanks for being here. And thank you for once again sharing the Winter Solstice Lantern Festival with everyone in the city on the solstice, December 21st. So we have one more registered speaker. Is Warren Williams here? He's not. He'll maybe be next then. Jamie Ward is our final registered speaker. Is Jamie Ward here? Last chance for Jamie Ward, not here. Warren Williams, I understand, should be back here in the next 5 minutes, but that is all the speakers that we have right now on the speakers list. So we are going to go now to any additional questions for staff from council. And we'll give Mr. Williams an opportunity to speak when he arrives. I don't think he was anticipating we would be done with speakers quite yet, but any questions for staff? Final round of questions. Councillor Carr.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I've actually been taking down questions along with ones I wasn't able to ask before, and I wonder if you could just provide direction. Last year, I remember that I just forwarded them to staff so that they could have them before, and rather than go into just a few of them now, I'd prefer to do that if that could be a process we could follow.
Okay, we certainly can do that by email. I'd maybe just anyone who wants to ask a question now while we're in a public meeting can do that. If there are any questions germane to today's presentations, that would be good. And otherwise, council can email questions to staff and they can be answered when we open the next meeting in a week's time.
Okay, great, thank you. Then I'll just ask one question because appropriate staff are here. And it's not you, I'm sorry to say, but perhaps Chief McKerney, who's here, could answer this question. And it arose out of a question, Chief, that I asked earlier on of Mr. Weeks, which is whether they had been involved at all in the discussions that were reflected in the possible actions, additional actions to be taken to handle or respond to the fentanyl crisis. I'm wondering if it is possible, because the city manager said that it will be a report back, there will be more work done, we will get a report back, if there can be discussions with sort of our on-the-ground firefighters in their preparation of those options.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I put a proposal forward to our city for an increase of staffing in July as an investment, based on the workload that we were seeing there. It's mushroomed well beyond that, and there's other needs in the city, and I understand that. This crisis has now brought that forward again. Certainly, Mr. Weeks was aware of that original ask. We have been in consultation with our officers and our crew in the downtown east side, and there has been discussion around this. So I agree that it has to be everybody involved in it. This recommendation to go to a third or a three-person unit, medic unit, is born out of the consultation with the crews down at number 2, as well as my operational staff. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just hoping that's reflective of what has happened, but I'm hoping moving forward.
Certainly.
There will be, my understanding from the city manager's response at that time to my question was that there will be a report back that will detail that. This is just a memo, but there will be a more detailed report back that fleshes out the the different options for additional actions.
Right.
And I'm hoping that during that process, again, there will be more consultation that takes place directly with those frontline
Yes.
responders.
Yeah. No, they've been involved, and certainly I agree that our president of the union and his board, if you like, needs to be part of that, and they're very supportive, I think, of this initiative.
I think so too.
Yeah.
But that's great to hear that they'll be involved. Thank you.
Okay, questions from Councillor Louie.
Yes, just a quick question to Mr. Bromley. This is regarding the washrooms issue and the timelines that were set out. There's an investment being made as part of this year's capital plan, I understand, but there's the request from the board was to advance that initiative with external additional monies. And maybe just describe to me what the planning process was at the park board, because you have a 4-year capital plan. Why not just advance, if that was the priority, why not advance that initiative, since it's in the capital plan to an extent, at least, or reallocate within the capital plan so that we can get the work done?
I think that through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Liu, I think that is one option, is to change. This was a motion that came forward last night. We discussed at the board the options. We have scoped out the 5 top priorities, and actually the delivery of this would be through REFM, our Real Estate and Facilities Management, who build the facilities for us. And we've done the scoping and the preliminary concept design, but we really only have funding for 1.5. So the thinking from the board was that, why don't we seek incremental dollars so that we can get ahead of it and not cannibalize some other component of our capital budget. Our capital budget is very lean. If I took a look at other areas, like some programs of paving and roofing and some of the other areas, we have to do a little bit at a time. Now, I think we're going to be in a good place, hopefully, with some funding partnerships, with other levels of government that will help expedite some of those if all things work out. But on this one, I think the feeling was, why don't we bundle it all together and not cannibalize another critical service area. So it's a judgment call, I guess, by the board and myself.
Okay, so it's over to us to decide on what we can cannibalize on our side.
I guess that's one way of viewing it. I do think that, my first effort always is to see how we can self-fund. So I like the strategy that in Q1, when we do adjustments and closeouts, we can take a look at where we at. Have we received any efficiencies through design build processes, and can I find my own ability to do that? So I'm not assuming that in Q1 it'll be incremental money that comes from somebody else's area, but at this stage in the game we can't readily identify something, but I would commit that we'll take a look at that in Q1.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Meggs is next.
I see Deputy Chief Fry is here, and I want him to answer some questions that he probably would have answered this morning, but we spent a lot of time on fentanyl, and there is a policing aspect in the city manager's memo, which I think is contemplating some investments in community policing. So I wonder if you could tell us a bit what the deliverables would be on that, and I also wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the enforcement side of the fentanyl crisis and whether there are strategies that from a policing perspective could assist. I know it's almost an exercise in frustration because it's such a small amount of this substance can cause such havoc, but I'd be interested in your comments on both those issues.
Sure, and I'm not the deputy that usually deals with that side, but I'll tell you as a group what we've talked about and strategized. So you're right, fentanyl is a very small amount, can kill you. Now it's carfentanil, even more deadlier. Factories making it overseas, or you could get it in as precursors, individual ingredients. Very hard, very difficult to enforce because of the different varieties of ways you can bring it to the street and hide it. On the enforcement side, on the big picture, we're working with the Federal Serious Organized Crime team to look for those kind of enforcement areas where people are bringing it in. So on a bigger picture scale. On the street level, we're looking at the biggest investment will be, things like getting information out of encrypted phones out of gangsters on the street, people that are dealing with it, and then following those kind of intelligence leads into arrest and prevention at the front end. So community policing, I see the community policing office, I read that memo this morning. You know, community policing is good to create confidence at the street level. That's what community policing is about. It's about providing information. It will provide confidence. It will take ownership of not only where that office is located, but obviously an epicenter around that. It settles things down in a community and just creates that community confidence and reduces fear of crime, even though maybe the numbers hopefully will drop. And I'm not saying they will, just say, you know, people still have this perception that things are happening out there. Right now it's the fentanyl crisis. And community policing is something that always creates confidence and lets things settle down. So if you're wondering where the bang for the buck is on that one, it's more on perceptions of crime, positive, and the real impact will come on the other side.
The relationship on the street as well with people in the community.
That's right.
Yeah.
So we found that in the 90s on the South Slope on gangsters, and we put the MPOs, the CPCs into the Ross Street Temple. We put it into very active South Rand CPC. We had a lot of interdiction at, I'll just use the example, Moberly Elementary School used to be a huge feeder for gangsters back in the 90s, and we just got it, you know, just got in there and settled things down. So speaking about community impact from community CPC, that's what that would create.
Okay. Just one follow-up, if I may, Mr. Mayor. I'm curious about the business aspect of it. Is it your view that the fentanyl crisis is a new business line by existing organized criminals? Or is it, in fact, people who see an opportunity to exploit a substance that's available legally, perhaps overseas, and get into it themselves? Because both are very difficult, but I think a lot of people are baffled by the fact that such a deadly substance could be sold in such volume, and it just seems incomprehensible even from a criminal standpoint.
Yeah, you know, I don't know the right answer to that. I can tell you, I asked those questions just out of curiosity as well on the other side. It's like, who are these guys selling this stuff and where is it coming from? I'm pretty confident to say it's the same line of DNA, you know, people that are involved in this kind of business in other areas, and just see a very easy way to manufacture. It's cheaper, it's easier to hide. Police have a difficult time detecting it, and, you know, it's not a brick in the back of a trunk.
Profit margin?
Mm-hmm.
Big profit margin?
Big profit margin, and even though, you know, in layman's terms, you know, they're killing their customers, it's so cheap that their profit margins are still the draw, you know, and so there's that much profit in it, but it's the same DNA that's doing it.
Is it fair to say, this is my last question, that nobody, including your force, is really clear on where this story will go next?
I would say that's very accurate. So is it a social issue? Yes. Is it a policing issue? Yes. Is it a Vancouver fire response issue? Yes. Paramedics. Everybody owns this one. It's just an elusive cycle we're in here, trying to pin it down. And now the next wave is what we heard on the news the other day, you know, with possible terror threat levels around this product, you know. So it's a growing field.
Thanks for coming down today.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we've got Councillor DiGenova. Questions?
Thank you very much. I actually have a question for the general manager of the park board. Follow-up question to Councillor. Sorry.
I guess you're making me pay for not being here this morning, so I apologize on behalf.
I didn't know you weren't here this morning.
Yeah, I couldn't. I had a press event at the same time, unfortunately. So.
I was going to ask regarding the 5 accessible washrooms that the park board chair mentioned that there was a motion passed, and Councillor Louis asked about, was that just capital costs, or was there an operating cost for maintenance, which I understand can be expensive over time? Could you elaborate on that? Is that included in the 1.2 million? I thought that was capital.
It is, through you, Mr. Mayor. That is strictly for capital. We are maintaining those washrooms now. We have operating budget for the 5 washrooms. Actually, if we do a rebuild on them, the cost may go down because we'll build them in a way that's easier to clean, more contemporary. Even when you clean some of these washrooms, they don't look clean because they're just so old.
Okay.
It's strictly capital.
So just to follow up, or a question of clarification, we were told that these were new washrooms, but they're actually replacement washrooms.
They are.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Councillor Carr, did you have?
Yes, thanks,
little more time.
A few more minutes, and I realize that with Deputy Chief Rai here, that perhaps I could ask him a question that, I'm so sorry. It's not that you aren't popular, let me tell you. Thank you very much for being here. I was looking through some of the metrics that department by department, and I'm wondering if you could just give me an explanation or, tell me what you think is behind some of the increases that we've seen in some of the crime rates this past year. Not so much with violent crime, it's only slightly up, but I'm in looking at the metrics, it's in Appendix D, first page of that, page 51, that total criminal code offenses have gone up, property crimes have gone up, traffic incidents with fatalities and injuries have gone up. The violent crime rate has gone up slightly. So is there something going on that we need to know about as council?
So the chronic offender is still the issue. We were able to get ahead of it a few years back. I'll be honest with you, there's just more chronic offenders out on the street, and more chronic offenders, they are doing the theft from autos in a neighborhood, just like we had a few years back. It's a bit of an epidemic when you have a lot of chronic offenders out there, or an increase, and of course they're feeding their drug habit, and we're now having to manage quite a growth in the number of chronics. We were ahead of it before, and we've just probably lost track a little bit, and we aren't able to go in and monitor them in the halfway houses, put the projects on, put an enforcement project in a neighborhood on a chronic offender and work him or her. Maybe we did 5-6 years ago. Another small percentage is there is a migration out here, a little bit mentioned in the news. You do have people from other parts of the country, Alberta and that, where the economy is not great. And the Canadian Tire incident was a dramatic example of that. Chronic offenders, enforcement, probably not being able to, well, I know there's not probably, I know that we're not able to keep on top of as many chronics as we have now. And obviously we have a fentanyl crisis, and that has to be fed. That's the quick answer. There's a few more metrics in there I can get into, but it's the same old, there's more out there and need a few more resources to get on each one of them.
No, I think, thank you. It just paints a picture for us in terms of our budget and the allocation of funds in the budget and where the budget is increasing and why. So, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. And Councillor Stevenson, questions?
Thanks. Also the Deputy Chief, please.
Good.
Just wanted to follow up on the issue I spoke earlier to with the firefighters union on going forward with personnel to deal with acute problem, I understand, with personnel having to deal psychologically, emotionally with the issues that they see daily, obviously, given the crisis. How do you see the department going forward on this?
On mental, psychological? Yeah. On all the emergency services, you have an organization deals with that, especially first responders. It's growing in first responder, that trend across North America. PTSD, much more, individuals much more aware and are much more confident coming forward, where over a long period of time, they've been seeing and dealing with items that just take a toll. And that's compounded when you have officers, and I'll just speak for ourselves, but when there's a lot of overtime to fill. For in our case, VPD, we've been holding vacancies. Our budget's decreased since 2011, and we've have fewer officers now than we had in 2010. Crime rates are going up, response times are going down, and at the same time, policing has become this growing field. It's not just about catching the bad guy or the bank robber. Now it's, social issue policing. It's every other social issue, and we're all in it together. And so when you've got a growth in the industry, a growth in responsibilities, but you've maintained your same service levels with staffing, it's going to put the pressure on the individual members, whether it's working overtime, whether it's working different types of roles in a week.
So you have a full-time person though, basically deals with this in the department, right? Whereas the fire department doesn't. And do you see a kind of a need there as well for?
We've got a full system, so we have dedicated psychologists that we use regularly. We have a full-time person monitoring, following up in our employee services unit. We have another person that deals with just the back administrative part of it, assisting them through back to work. So we have the VPD has a very robust support network.
And that's been in place for some time.
That's been in place for a long time.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Stevenson. Before we go to Councillor Deal, who will be the last councillor with questions, Warren Williams is here to speak. So we'll give him an opportunity on behalf of members of QP Local 15. Welcome.
Thank you. Sorry, I've been dealing with some hiring at Local 15 for a staff representative, so it took us longer than we had anticipated, but I do appreciate your patience. I do want to say that I've had an opportunity to be briefed on the budget and have had an opportunity to talk about it with my staff, et cetera, and I want to point out a couple good things about the budget. We are pleased that a lot of thought and effort and work has gone into the budget by staff, and they've done I think they've done a decent job, and so I want to commend them for that work. City facilities are getting some much needed attention. Libraries, fire halls, attention to staff safety and security, redevelopment of the Edlin Sauer Center, which is really good news. Some major spending on childcare in the Vancouver schools, which is also very good news. So there are a lot of good things that are happening in the budget. I do want to speak briefly to the satisfaction surveys, and in particular the 43% of homeowners and 33% of businesses saying that they're getting good value with the services that they're provided with. But I think that, as I've said before, if you really want to increase your satisfaction surveys, the level of satisfaction from the citizens of Vancouver and the businesses in Vancouver, you need to look at converting auxiliary workers from auxiliary workers to regular part-time workers, converting temporary full-time workers from temporary work to full-time work. And I think if you do that, as a matter of fact, I know if you do that, it will increase your satisfaction survey percentages, both in the business sector and with this homeowners in Vancouver. And it's simply a matter of those workers, those employees, feeling that now they are a part of something. They're not looking over their shoulder, looking at, am I going to be working today? Am I not going to be working today? Oh, I've been doing this job for 9 years as an auxiliary worker, putting in the 17 point some hours a week. That really is, part-time work, and it's regular part-time work, so it should be recognized. And if you do that, they're not going to be also looking for work elsewhere. They're going to be committed to the City of Vancouver, and I think that's what you want. And it's the same with TFTs. You want those people, those members, those employees to be committed to the City of Vancouver. If there's a commitment on the behalf of your employees, it's going to show in your satisfaction surveys. You're going to see an increase in the percentages of in your satisfaction surveys. So I just wanted to say, bring that to the council's attention. Also, contracting out has been an issue in the city, and continues to be an issue in the city. But it's been proven through years of data research and supporting data from municipalities across the country and internationally that contracting out costs you more money than keeping the work within your system. In other words, contracting in. And there's a report just recently done by Columbia University. You can find it on the KIPI national website that speaks to that. municipalities in London, in Great Britain, the Netherlands, the United States, they're all moving away from contracting out. They're finding that they're spending more money contracting out. It's costing them more to contract out services than it is to keep the services within house. So, as I said, I'm really, really pleased and happy that you created this time for me and allowed me to do the business of my local and then to come back and speak to council. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for taking the time to be here and represent members of Local 15. And again, a big thanks for all the frontline work that your members are doing too. It's definitely keeps our city ticking in every which way, and we're very proud of the work that all your members do. So thanks for being here. And Councillor Deal, did you have a question for Mr. Williams, or you?
I actually will ask a quick question, just to follow up on many other questions we've had here today, and I know you've seen part of that, is you also represent people who are, in fact, frontline workers. And so in terms of the crises we're seeing in the city, are people from QP15 also being
Yes, there's going to be training provided to some of our members that are frontline and that are dealing, particularly in the downtown east side. And you know, it's welcome and much needed. As you know, frontline workers generally are compassionate and will race in when they really shouldn't, and to see that they're going to be properly trained is a very good thing to see.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as we move forward with our how to address this challenge, I just want to support that all of our emergency support workers and QP 1004 and QP 15 and 391 are all represented as well, or acknowledged as well, in terms of the work that you're doing as well. Thank you. I have another question that's not for you. Just to ask staff to follow up with some of the apples and oranges discussion we had earlier today around arts funding. There's a lot of numbers out there. I don't need an answer now, and you probably don't have one. There are many, many numbers in the cultural funding portfolio, and they're from engineering, they're from parks, they're from various different departments, capital operating. And if we could get an apples to apples sort of table of those numbers, both for this year, next year, and perhaps going back a few years, so that we can see those trend lines and side-by-side comparisons, that would be very useful by the time we are debating this budget.
So we can do that as part of the other council Q&As that are being requested. And
that would be great, because it's often been, like, I've got 3 different numbers for what this year's number is, and it depends on what you include and which pockets you're including in that. So,
okay,
thank you.
If I can just address that. Firstly, sorry for the confusion. We absolutely recognize that art and culture are supported throughout our organization, and we haven't actually been very good at finding a way to bundle it all together. As you said, we've got an artist in residence and sustainability. We've got art, culture that we support through civic theaters. We've got CACs that we allocate to art facilities, and so we haven't been able to bundle that all up in one place. And so what we'll do, we've already started to do based on the discussion today, is to put together one table that looks across all of those areas and tries to put it out over the last few years. And so we'll get that to you in a written form, in a memo, before you consider the budget, so that you can at least understand what has been allocated over the last few years and how it compares to what we've been hearing today.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, so that is the end of our questions for staff from council. And any more questions that you have, you can email them to staff over the coming days. Probably the sooner the better, given we will be back here for what should be final consideration of the budget next week. So giving staff enough time to prepare responses to those questions that can come at the beginning of the session next week on the 2017 capital and operating budget. That would be helpful to have the questions to staff right away. Big thanks to staff for all the work being here today, and the exhaustive months of preparation to get us here today. Lots of dedicated efforts, and I appreciate the detail and the responses today to the questions that council has had. So we're ready to. We need someone. Councillor Meggs, do you want to move the referral discussion, the motion referral discussion and decision to regular council meeting December 13th?
Mr. Mayor, and you've caught me a bit flat-footed here. I had some proposed amendment to that motion. before we do it, so if you'll just bear with me for 1 second, I'll get back on here.
So that, yeah, referring discussion and decision of the regular council, that is on December the 13th, 2016. We would consider that as unfinished business at that meeting as per the usual process. And
Mr. Mayor, I could incorporate, if I could just get logged on here again, language that covers off the the city manager's memo, then we would have that in front of us for the discussion next week. Pardon me?
Can you pull your microphone?
Of the special measures for the fentanyl crisis. So I'm at your disposal. We can try to make that change next week, or I could do it right now.
We can include that next week in terms of the actual motion, but today just refer the discussion and decision. Councillor Meggs will move, Councillor Louis will second. Any further discussion or debate on referral to to December 13th? All those in favor of referral? Any opposed to referral? And that carries unanimously. So we will bring that back next week for consideration. And that means when you're ready for a motion to adjourn the special council meeting. Councillor Louis moves, seconder. Councillor Deal, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. So this special council meeting is adjourned. And as a final reminder, the discussion and decision, final round of questions being answered by staff on the 2017 budget will take place at the regular council meeting December the 13th. And council members are requested to keep their materials on the 2017 operating and capital budgets, as they will not be redistributed. So hold on to your paperwork, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.